was a woman looking to strike out on her own.
She was just ready to live life.
They were the couple that opened up their door and their hearts to her.
She was trusting. She was innocent. She was protected.
They all seemed like the best of friends. Until a startling discovery sparked a desperate search.
They had no body, they had nothing. They just knew, here's blood on the parking lot floor.
As the manhunt unfolded, investigators wondered, is this an innocent friendship or a twisted threesome built on infidelity, lies, and cold-blooded murder?
This rage is building up.
She was experimenting with her sexuality.
She would meet people online and talk to them and just go meet them.
The person that did this to this victim was angry. They wanted this person out of their life permanently.
Monday, November 17th, 2008, 8:30 a.m. The property manager at a Herndon, Virginia apartment complex is walking through the building's parking garage when a shocking sight stops him dead in his tracks.
He noticed a puddle of blood and blood stain all over the garage floor, which kind of alerted him to something is not right, and he calls the police.
Within minutes, officers arrive at the scene.
The blood stains, the puddle of blood, something went wrong. That was foul play there.
But aside from the blood evidence, police don't have much else to go on.
They had no body, they had nothing. They just knew, here's blood on the parking lot floor.
170 to dispatch. Start supervisor, crime lab, and on-call investigator, please.
Officers call for backup and request the assistance of their CSI team.
They start going through every tooth and nail pertaining to how this evidence got here, who it could belong to, and what happened to the person whose blood was found. Is that person still alive?
As police fan out across the garage, it isn't long before they notice something else.
We have a blood stain on the garage floor that leads to this dumpster.
The trash that day was supposed to have been picked up. However, the individuals had not gotten there yet, so they were able to secure the trash from the dumpster.
Detectives may have caught a break, but finding evidence in an overflowing dumpster is no easy task.
The trash compactor has to be combed through piece by piece. It's like looking for a needle in a haystack. You have no clue as to what you're looking for.
Sorting through the pile of garbage, investigators make a chilling discovery.
Inside that dumpster, a lot of personal objects was found, such as a mobile phone, key fob, and articles of clothing.
And what do you do with a cell phone? You start checking the numbers and see who it belongs to.
There's a lot of calls from this one number yesterday. I'm gonna call it back, see who it is.
And the person on the other side of this phone call will spark an investigation into a twisted web of love and deceit, all surrounding one woman. 22-year-old Erica Yancey. Born in Michigan City, Indiana in 1986, Erica Yancey was a bright and loving child, but sadly, her early life was marred by tragedy.
Erica's father was murdered.
In the eyes of her family, Erica became a very special child.
We all kind of gathered around, and as they say in the Western, we circled the wagons to protect Erica.
She was the apple of my eye. You always protected your last child, and I didn't consider her a grandchild. I considered her my child.
Growing up, Erica worked hard at her studies, graduated high school, and in 2005, she jumped at an offer to move in with her aunt in the D.C. area, and soon landed a job handling baggage at Dulles International Airport.
Erica ended up being the first woman with that company that drove one of the tugs, that bus that moves the plane into place.
As aggressive as Erica was about her job, she was even more excited to be living in a place as diverse and open-minded as Metro D.C.
She went buck wild. She got into this different alternative lifestyle. She decided that she was gay. She cut off all of her hair. She got piercings. She got tattoos.
I figured that was just a stage everybody went through. She did what she wanted to do, but she became her own person. And she was a lovely person.
Erica also bought a new car, a silver 2007 Hyundai. It was her pride and joy, a sign of her newfound freedom and mobility.
Once she got the cars, you can see her just like a little bird getting her wings and just ready to do things.
Erica also started surfing the net, meeting new friends and new love interests in online chat rooms.
She would meet people online and talk to them and just go meet them.
She informed us that she had met a friend that lived in New York. And my sister Paige and I found out about it, and we told her, over our dead bodies, are you going? And of course, she went.
During the trip, Erica found a new lover and a new responsibility.
I found out that Erica, like the young lady that she met in New York, we found out that Erica was sending her money because she had kids. She wanted to help those people that had less than she did.
It wouldn't be the only young woman that Erica fell for online. While Erica was seeing the young woman in New York, she met Ellen Parker.
Erica and Ellen met on an online site, and in the course of chatting online, they discovered that they worked very near to each other.
But unlike her previous online connection, Erica and Ellen's relationship wasn't physical. Ellen was heterosexual and was living with her boyfriend, Marcus Williams, with whom she had a lovely child.
Ellen Phillips and Marcus Williams were an item. They had an apartment together.
Pregnant with their second child, Ellen and Marcus had their share of problems, from a lack of quality childcare to occasional cash flow issues. But ever the giving soul, Erica was glad to help out any way possible, which allowed her to do a good deed while strengthening her relationship with Ellen.
I can remember telling her, Erica, that's not something that you really want to get involved in. But because she was such a caring person, she got involved.
In fact, Ellen and Erica grew so close that when Ellen gave birth, Erica was right by her side at the hospital.
She called it her baby. So, my mom sent you a picture of my baby when you get a baby. Then she said, no, it's my friend's baby.
In September 2008, Ellen, Marcus, and their 2 children moved into a cozy 3-bedroom apartment near the airport. Soon after that, they invited Erica to come live with them. And though her biological family had no idea what to make of Erica's living arrangement or her continued relationship with her lover in New York, the 22-year-old felt she was living the life of her dreams.
She was off on her own for the first time and don't know whether to go blind or bark at the moon.
But Erica Yancey's dream takes a deeply disturbing turn on November 17, 2008. It starts when investigators are called to an apartment complex in suburban D.C., the same apartment complex where Erica, Ellen, and Marcus recently moved in. They've been asked to investigate a bloody trail that leads from the parking garage to a nearby dumpster. Searching the dumpster, they find several personal items, including a cell phone. As CSIs continue their search, detectives review the phone's incoming call log. It seems someone had repeatedly called this phone the day before. Dialing the number, they connect with Jacqueline Goodall.
Hi, this is Detective John with the police department. We found this phone near a crime scene and was trying to determine whose phone it was.
A crime scene?
My number came up on her phone.
Jacqueline's surprised to hear an unfamiliar voice calling from this phone. It's registered to her favorite niece, 22-year-old Erica Yancey, who lives in the apartment complex where the phone was found.
We didn't know where Erica was. We couldn't reach her. And I received a call. They found the cell phone. They found clothes that were bloody. And that's when he began to explain to me that they saw a lot of blood.
A lot of blood? What do you mean a lot of blood?
Ma'am, there's actually quite a bit.
Is it so much blood that she might not be alive?
It's a terrifying proposition, one that opens a floodgate of other possibilities. Is there a connection between the trail of blood and the personal items detectives found in the trash? Has Erica been the victim of a violent attack? If so, where is she now? While Erica's family holds out hope, Detectives race to answer these questions. But little do they know, the case is about to take a dark and deeply sinister turn. 22-year-old Erica Yancey discovered newfound freedom when she moved into an apartment in Herndon, Virginia, with her online acquaintance turned best friend, Ellen Parker, and Ellen's boyfriend, Marcus Williams.
They connected with each other and realized that they had a lot in common. They basically worked in the same area, and the friendship struck up from there.
It seemed like a friendship destined to last forever. But on November 17th, 2008, Erica suddenly disappeared. And all that's left behind is a trail of blood in her parking garage, leading to a dumpster filled with her personal belongings.
They find the blood, they want to search the trash to see if something's in there.
They went in piece by piece, bag by bag, and collected whatever evidence, but then, of course, you got to separate the garbage from the evidence. And that is very hard to do.
It's a process that also takes time, something investigators and Erica's family know is in very short supply.
We didn't know where Erica was or how she was. I thought she was somewhere laying in a ditch someplace.
Detectives are eager to interview Erica's roommates, Marcus Williams and his girlfriend, Ellen Parker.
We'd like to ask you a couple of questions.
What is this about?
Well, we believe someone abducted and attacked Erica Yancey.
Okay, all right, come in.
According to best friend Ellen, the last time she saw her roommate was the day before.
The morning of November 16, Erica and Ellen get up, and Erica drives Ellen to work at her place of business near Dulles Airport. They had one car that they were sharing. It was Erica's car. And so Ellen expected that Erica would go back home, maybe go back to sleep.
Well, basically, I made her lunch for her, and she gave me a ride to work, and she told me that she would give me a call later on, and I just didn't hear anything from her the whole day.
She never received a telephone call at work that day, which she thought was a little unusual. It wasn't anything major. But Ellen continued by saying that throughout the entire day, she never heard anything from Erica.
Ellen says that following her shift, she had a coworker drive her home. Erica's car wasn't in the parking garage, which seemed a bit out of the ordinary. And when Ellen set foot inside the apartment, something else caught her eye.
The first thing she recognized is that the lunch that she had made for Erica had not been eaten or touched. So she began wondering, well, what could have happened to Erica?
Ellen figured, well, Erica must be off visiting her family, and I'll talk to her at some point.
Detectives also question Ellen's boyfriend, Marcus Williams, who confirms that after Erica drove Ellen to work, she never returned to their apartment.
So you didn't see her the rest of the day?
I've been here watching the kids all day. I haven't seen her since this morning.
After a search of the residence, police find no sign of Erica, nor do they find signs of foul play. It appears the couple's version of events is accurate. So what happened to Erica, and where is she now?
Maybe somebody had robbed her, or somebody had took her car, that she had fought him, that she had gotten hurt.
I thought she was carjacked, yeah. I thought somebody was trying to rob her.
That's not the only theory being floated.
So she just started experimenting with her life.
Maybe she met someone online, and that situation ended up being a terrible situation.
As the investigation shifts into high gear, Erica's mother flies to Virginia from her home in Indiana.
They were still looking for her. They had the newscast everywhere. I was on the news telling them just to let her come home.
But just days after the televised plea, officers make a huge discovery.
An officer observed a car fit in the description of the missing car.
The car is parked in the handicap zone of an industrial parking lot. The officer runs the tags and confirms it's Erica's car.
Investigators looked inside the car and noticed there was a body partially covered in the back seat.
Erica is lying in the back seat on the floor.
For Erica's family, it's a gut-wrenching turn of events.
Calling my mom was the hardest thing that I've ever done. because Erica was her baby.
I was angry, like anybody. I wanted to really get to the person.
As Erica's family grapples with this tragedy, police know a stone-cold killer remains at large. And soon clues from the crime scene will fuel new speculation as to what may have happened to the young woman almost everyone adored. On November 19th, 2008, the frantic search for missing 22-year-old Erica Yancey came to a grim end when police found her body in the back of her car.
She had been stabbed several other places on the body, but the main wound was a serious throat slit.
You can't do that to somebody. You don't do that to somebody. There's no reason for it. There's no reason for violence like that.
Erica's car is parked at a business a half a mile away from her apartment complex. As investigators examine the gory scene, it's obvious Erica had put up the fight of her life.
Multiple stab wounds to her body, a lot of stab wounds on the backside of her hands.
Anytime you might see wounds to the hand, elbows, and arms, those are defensive wounds. You know, someone's getting stabbed, they're putting their arms up and stuff, trying to stop the blows from coming.
Searching the crime scene, CSIs locate what appears to be the murder weapon, buried in a potted plant beside the car.
The apparent murder weapon, the box cutter, was found with Erica's blood on it.
After tagging the evidence, the next question for investigators is what may have sparked this violent encounter. Judging by the nature of Erica's wounds, the robbery angle seems like an unlikely motive.
On a street robbery, you won't have a victim receiving so many stab wounds. The assailant wants to just go in, do what they gotta do, and leave. Erica had a significant wound underneath her neck from the left side to the right side. The type of person that would cause that type of injury to another person is a person who's passionate.
The possibility that Erica may have known her assailant is a chilling thought. But just how had her body wound up here?
They sliced her neck, put her body in the car, and then they drove her body off about a half mile away from where she lived.
Detectives decide it's time to take a closer look at Erica's personal relationships. Could her killer be one of the many women she'd allegedly wooed on the internet?
Well, when you meet people in cyberspace, you only meet what they want you to meet.
Erica's hardest thing was trusting. She trusted everybody and believed everybody.
Speaking to Erica's family again, one love interest rises to the top of the suspect list.
She was seeing somebody in New York, and she's doing this, and she's just going out being all kind of just gallivanting around, just having a good old time.
What can you tell us about this woman?
Well, I don't know that much about her, but Erica really seemed to like her a lot.
I think she was mixed up about her relationships.
To police, it seems they may have finally found a motive that fits the crime. Could Erica's lover in New York be jealous about her other girlfriends or her unique relationship with Ellen and Marcus? If that's the case, could that jealousy have boiled over into rage?
My initial thoughts is, you know what? That New York girl, she done did something crazy.
Police identify Erica's lover and race to New York. Detectives can't help but wonder if this is the big break they're looking for. But to their surprise, when police confront Erica's girlfriend about her death, she seems genuinely shocked. Pressing her further, she denies any involvement in Erica's death and claims to have never left New York.
Well, I've been here.
You've been here?
Yes, I've been here in New York.
The whole time?
Yes.
While police attempt to verify her alibi, she makes a startling confession.
How well did you know her?
I loved Erica, but me and Erica weren't exclusive. We decided to see other people, and she hasn't been here in a while.
To police, it's not the news they're expecting to hear and seems to undermine any motive on her part. A fact that's ultimately confirmed when her alibi checks out. With their investigation stymied, police decide to circle back around to the crime scene they'd encountered days earlier. Having already scoured the parking garage where Erica's body was found, detectives turn to the help of canine officers.
A bloodhound was brought in by the police department, and these dogs are specifically trained to follow scents.
Using scents from items found inside her car, the dog takes off. But to their surprise, it doesn't lead its handler away from the scene, but straight back to Erica's apartment building.
The Fairfax County dog was able to follow the trail of blood from the parking spot through the parking lot to the door to the apartment complex, but loses the scent.
But why would Erica's killer return to the original crime scene?
Only residents typically can get in and out of the building, and that leads police to believe this person is likely a resident of this building.
Could someone in Erica's own complex really be behind this terrible crime? As police dig deeper, they discover a shocking new clue, along with a lover who's harboring a very deep secret. 22-year-old Erica Yancey believed she had the world at her fingertips. A baggage handler for Delta Airlines, she had a great job, a second family, and a lover in New York.
She was just ready to live life.
But that life came to a terrible end when police found Erica savagely stabbed to death in the back seat of her new car.
The person that did this to this victim was angry, was more like in a jealous rage. They wanted this person out of their life permanently.
At first, investigators suspect Erica's girlfriend in New York might have murdered her out of jealousy. But the woman has an airtight alibi. With the assailant still at large, investigators turn their attention back to Erica's vehicle, where a bloodhound provides them with one very curious clue.
The dog starts at where Erica's body is found with the car and traces the trail back to the apartment complex.
This seems like someone who's very familiar with this building is involved in this.
But who? With more than 200 units in the sprawling apartment complex, detectives know they have their work cut out for them. But before they start knocking on too many doors, detectives receive a call from their CSI team. They found something in the dumpster besides Erica's belongings.
There was clothing that they found that had blood on it.
It was a worn tank top, some commonly referred to as a wife beater. There was blue jeans, gloves, and 2 ski masks.
The gloves in the trash had Erica's blood on them, and that also had unknown DNA.
Finding 2 sets of gloves and masks means 2 people could be involved in this brutal attack. This revelation prompts detectives to pay another visit to the pair of apartment residents closest to Erica, her roommates, Ellen Parker and Marcus Williams.
These are passionate wounds. So you start looking at those people that's closest to her. Well, she has Ellen, who's her friend. She also has Marcus, who's her friend.
Police asked the couple to come down to the station for a formal interview. Once there, detectives begin by questioning Ellen Parker.
So neither you nor Marcus had anything to do with this murder?
No.
You're hiding something.
That's when Ellen finally confesses, not to murder, but to a passionate love affair with Erica.
Initially, they were just online friends, but then that relationship blossomed into something more.
Ellen admits the relationship was unexpected, but their deep attraction for one another was undeniable.
I thought Erica loved Ellen. And from my perception, I thought Ellen loved Erica. It looked like it was blooming love.
In fact, she says the situation had grown so steamy that Erica, not Marcus, was sleeping in the master bedroom with her.
Suddenly, Erica and Ellen are sharing the main bedroom, and Marcus is in the other bedroom.
According to Ellen, it wasn't her first affair with another woman.
Marcus and I had an agreement. He's let me do this before. I've been with women before. He hasn't ever had a problem with it, and he's fine with us having like an open relationship and me exploring what's out there.
But Ellen does admit that this lesbian liaison had gone farther than the rest.
And Ellen described a romantic night out that she and Erica had, I think it was about 2 weeks earlier, maybe less. They had an expensive night out at a hotel.
But when Erica and Ellen returned home from their steamy night out, they discovered someone had vandalized Erica's beloved new car.
Someone keyed her vehicle and caused her to become very upset. Was someone so hurt by the fact that now Erica and Ellen are going away on a romantic getaway so that they're gonna scratch this car?
According to Ellen, after Erica's car was keyed, the living arrangement with Marcus continued to deteriorate. And in October of 2008, Ellen decided it was time to put an end to the relationship.
Ellen told Marcus, "We're through. We're breaking up. I'm moving out. I'm taking the kids." Ellen and Erica were going to be moving in together.
Could the threat of losing his girlfriend and children to another woman have pushed Marcus over the edge?
No. Marcus loved Erica like his sister. There's no way that he could have done that.
Did Ellen know more than she was letting on? And could jealousy have eaten into her heart? During her interrogation, Ellen had admitted she was aware of Erica's other lover.
Ellen had said that she had heard a voicemail on Erica's phone about another woman.
Was there an argument just before she left? Was there some kind of a dispute between them? They had to consider Ellen a person of interest.
But Ellen remains adamant neither she nor Marcus had anything to do with Erica's death. While police check out Ellen's alibi that she was at work, they turn up the heat on Marcus Williams.
How did you feel about your girlfriend running off with another woman?
Well, it didn't really make me happy.
But Marcus asserts he's no killer. He claims that when Erica went missing, he was at home watching his kids.
Sir, it's like I told you guys earlier. There's no possible way I could have been anywhere else. I swear, man, I'm innocent.
While police certainly have their suspicions, they have no hard evidence on which to hold either Marcus or Ellen. Still, they swab them both for DNA in case they are able to link them to the crime scene. And after confirming Ellen's alibi, police released them that afternoon.
Ellen was at work, and that was quickly substantiated by the police. She was at work that morning.
The police are definitely keeping an eye on Marcus, and they had, at this point, interviewed him extensively. They've taken his DNA, and they know where he is.
While Marcus maintains his innocence, Erica's family prepares to lay her to rest.
After Erica's body was found, they did hold a memorial service for her, and 100 people showed up to pay tribute to her.
Among the throng of mourners are Ellen Parker and Marcus Williams. Marcus remains low-key and respectful, but after viewing Erica's body, Ellen loses it.
Ellen was, "Oh my God, I'm so scared. I don't know who had did this. And, maybe they're after me and I got to get away," and she was crying.
Shortly after the funeral, although Ellen and Erica had been an item, Marcus and Ellen reconnect and move to Michigan with Ellen's mother.
Without any evidence tying Marcus to the crime, police are powerless to stop the couple from moving. They vow to Erica's family they won't stop until the crime is solved. But months pass with no new developments. Then on September 21st, 2009, there's a shocking break in the case.
Michael Thomas is arrested and charged with murder.
The announcement leaves Erica's friends and family stunned.
I was like, who is Michael Thomas and what does Michael Thomas have to do with any of this?
Who is this mystery man? And what role had he allegedly played in this crime? That answer is about to come to light, and the truth is far more twisted than anyone. September 1st, 2009. 10 months after Erica Yancey was slashed to death with a box cutter, police make a surprise arrest in the case. 27-year-old Maryland resident, Michael Thomas.
There was a significant amount of evidence that was found in the dumpster in the apartment building in the garage. The DNA found inside the gloves belonged to Michael.
It's enough evidence to charge Michael with the crime, but detectives are still curious about his connection to the victim. Unfortunately, Erica's family is at a loss.
I knew nothing about Michael Thomas. We didn't know anything about Michael Thomas.
And as police dig deeper into his background, an unlikely picture of the alleged perpetrator begins to emerge.
Michael Thomas was kind of a geeky, nerdy, church-going, all the good things that people want to say about their child. So he went to school, got an education, came back, got a job, taught for a year as a teacher.
Very even-tempered, mild-mannered. I've never seen him angry, never seen him out of control.
While Michael doesn't exactly fit the profile of a killer, the background check turns up something else. According to his friends and family, Michael doesn't live in Erica's apartment complex, but he knows someone that did. Marcus Williams.
Michael Thomas was Marcus's friend. He didn't live in this area, but he came to town and was visiting, and they spent Saturday night together watching a UFC pay-per-view fight at their apartment.
Investigators also learned that the night before Erica's attack, Marcus invited Michael Thomas to spend the night at his apartment.
Michael Thomas was there, and he slept on the couch that night, or appeared to be asleep on the couch when Ellen and Erica left for work that morning.
To detectives, the timing seems more than coincidental and suggests not only that Michael Thomas was involved in Erica's murder, but Marcus Williams might have been too. That theory is supported when the results of DNA tests on Erica's clothes come back from the lab.
When the DNA tests came back, it showed that Marcus's DNA was on a number of these bloody clothing items that had Erica's blood on them.
24 hours later, police arrest Marcus in Michigan and extradite him back to Virginia for the murder of his former roommate, Erica Yancey.
I was shocked that it was who it was. I kept saying, why did they do it? Why did they kill her like that? Why?
With neither suspect talking and their trials scheduled for separate dates, those answers don't become clear until April 30th, 2010. That day, Marcus Williams is led into a Fairfax County courtroom to stand trial for first-degree murder.
When I went to the trial and I saw Marcus standing right by me, he looked like any other normal, dressed well person. You know, you wouldn't picture him as someone who would kill somebody.
But prosecutors believe they've got the right man. In their opening arguments, they assert Marcus had grown increasingly bitter about his girlfriend Ellen Parker's sexual relationship with Erica Yancey.
Ellen and Erica move into the same bedroom, and Marcus moves into another bedroom. And Ellen and Erica become the couple of the house.
Your significant other, the mother of your children, come in and another woman come put you out of your room, out of your bed. That's a slap in the face for most men.
Prosecutors say the last straw came in October 2008, when Ellen told Marcus she was leaving him for Erica once and for all. They assert that on November 16th, Marcus enlisted the help of his friend, Michael Thomas. After Erica dropped Ellen off at work, Marcus and Michael donned masks and gloves and set out to remove Erica from Marcus's life for good.
It was jealousy. He felt that she was taking his family from him.
Leaving his and Ellen's children alone in the apartment, Marcus and Michael ambushed Erica not far from her car. As Erica struggled to break free from her attackers, one of them pulled out a box cutter and slashed her throat.
They killed her, put her body in the car, threw all of the evidence in the local dumpster. And then they drove her body off about a half mile away from where she lived.
With all the evidence hidden away, the two then walked back to Marcus's apartment.
Marcus wanted Erica out of there because he had been, kicked to the curb by Ellen. So the motive presumably was to get Erica out of the picture and so that Marcus could reunite this family.
To bolster that theory, prosecutors highlight the slew of physical evidence that points to Marcus's guilt. The state's DNA findings, the scent trail leading back to the apartment, and last but not least, a surprise piece of evidence some intrepid CSIs found in the parking garage not far from the pool of blood.
But they found a lot of bleach. And to investigators, when you find bleach on a crime scene like that, you know someone there has been trying to clean up or get rid of evidence.
It had to be somebody in the building because of the bleach.
One would have to reasonably conclude Marcus had to have been the person who committed this horrible act.
But Marcus's defense team argues otherwise. highlighting the lack of eyewitnesses or any surveillance footage tying him to Erica's murder. To bolster that assertion, they call Erica's former lover, Ellen Parker, to the stand.
Ellen said, I don't think Marcus could have done this. Marcus isn't like that. Erica and Marcus got along very well, and pointed out that after the homicide, Ellen and Marcus got back together and lived together with their children again.
For Erica's friends and family listening in the courtroom, the testimony, along with Ellen's decision to stand by Marcus, strikes as the ultimate betrayal.
I think Ellen used Erica. I think that Erica to Ellen was just a meal ticket that she could manipulate. She was young and dumb, and this was somebody that she could just use.
While Ellen's testimony seems to undermine the state's case, defense attorneys still have one major hurdle to overcome: Marcus's DNA found on the bloody clothing. But his attorneys believe they can explain away that evidence.
Erica sometimes wore men's clothes, and she sometimes wore Marcus's clothes, which is why the defense said Marcus's DNA would be on clothing worn by Erica, including the bloody clothing.
The defense has made a powerful argument, but after 6 days of grueling testimony, is it enough to sway the jury? The answer to that question is about to send a jolt right through the courtroom.
For us, it was not a matter of whether or not he was guilty. It was whether or not the jury was going to find him guilty.
In a Fairfax County courtroom, prosecutors have argued that with the help of his friend, Michael Thomas, a jealous Marcus Williams killed his ex-girlfriend's lesbian lover, Erica Yancey, in an effort to get his family back together.
In his mind at the time, that was the only way he could get away with Ellen, is to get rid of Erica.
Prosecutors claim DNA evidence found on bloody clothing implicates both Marcus and Michael in the twisted crime. It's a contention Marcus's defense team has fought hard to dispute throughout the trial.
The defense lawyers for Marcus pointed out that they all lived together, so they're just by being in the same house and doing the laundry, the DNA could have mixed.
It's certainly a plausible theory, but will the jury buy it? On May 5th, 2010, after hours of deliberation, they return with Marcus's verdict: guilty.
The range for murder one is 20 years to life in Virginia, and they gave him the minimum, 20 years.
Felt great when they said 20 years. Wish it would have been more.
Less than 2 weeks later, on May 17th, 2010, alleged co-conspirator Michael Thomas's murder trial gets underway. Michael's friends and family still can't believe the charges levied against this seemingly straight-laced, even-tempered young man.
Just seems so out of character. This was just the last thing on earth that you would ever have thought about Michael Thomas.
But once the trial's underway, there's no refuting the physical evidence squarely placing Michael at the scene.
Why would his DNA be on the inside of a glove that has blood on it? Unless he had those gloves on at one time.
The jury agrees, and on June 1st, they hand down a similar verdict and sentence to the one imposed on Marcus Williams: 20 years in prison.
They really should have stayed in jail for the rest of their life. Erica can't come home, and neither should they.
But in a case where so much pain still lingers, many wonder if this heartache could have been avoided if Marcus hadn't let his jealousy get the best of him.
When Denver Police Patrol officers were dispatched to conduct a welfare check late the following afternoon, they found Lucas Bennett's residence untouched. There was no sign of forced entry, no struggle, no broken glass, and no overturned furniture. On the kitchen counter, a half-empty mug of coffee sat beside an open blueprint roll, as if the young man had simply stepped away for a single second and forgotten to return. His wallet, containing his credit cards and driver's license, remained undisturbed on the entry table next to his house keys. But outside in the driveway, his dark blue 1995 Ford Explorer was gone. The immediate assumption among distant acquaintances was a sudden, impulsive road trip. a young man taking a breath away from the grinding pressure of work. But those who truly knew Lucas understood that he was a creature of absolute habit. He didn't drop out of sight. He didn't ignore calls. And he certainly didn't leave his life behind without a trace. The investigation took a terrifying turn 48 hours later when a park ranger patrolling the isolated outskirts of Cherry Creek State Park spotted a dark vehicle parked off an unpaved access road, nearly submerged in snowdrifts beneath a grove of barren cottonwood trees. It was Bennett's Ford Explorer. When homicide detectives arrived at the scene, the air was 60 degrees below freezing, preserving the vehicle in a pristine, icy tomb. The driver's door was unlocked. The keys were gone. On the front passenger seat lay Lucas Bennett's heavy winter coat, the coat his family swore he never left home without in sub-zero weather. On the dashboard, dusted with a fine layer of frost, rested an unopened pack of cigarettes and a folded paper map of the Denver metro area. But there was no sign of Lucas. No footprints leading away from the tires through the deep snow. No blood, no shell casings, no signs of violence. It was as if the car had been deposited by the storm itself, a ghost ship stranded in an ocean of white. The sudden, inexplicable disappearance of Lucas Bennett sent a seismic shockwave through the quiet suburban neighborhoods of Denver. Headlines across the Denver Post and local evening news broadcasts screamed with dramatic urgency. Cold night, frozen trails, young architect vanishes without a trace. The mystery struck a raw, sensitive nerve in a city that prided itself on safety and community closeness. How could a man vanish from a public park with his vehicle left behind, his winter coat abandoned on the seat, and not a single witness coming forward? In the days that followed, search parties equipped with snowmobiles, bloodhounds, and helicopter thermal imaging swept through hundreds of acres of frozen brushland surrounding Cherry Creek. Volunteer teams combed through freezing creek beds and snowbanks, shouting Lucas's name into the biting wind. But the mountains gave back nothing but silence. At the center of the frantic search stood Julian Vance. Devastated, relentless, and visibly crushed by grief, Julian became the public face of the campaign to find his missing best friend. He organized candlelight vigils on the steps of the municipal building, printed thousands of missing person flyers with his own money, and spoke directly to news cameras with tears in his eyes, pleading for anyone with information to come forward. "Lucas is my brother," Julian told reporters during a tearful press conference outside the precinct, his voice trembling against the cold wind. "We've known each other since we were 7 years old. I won't stop searching until I bring him home." To the public and the media, Julian Vance was the definition of unwavering devotion, a grieving friend standing as a fortress against the cold reality of a horrific mystery. Yet beneath the public sorrow and the relentless media coverage, homicide detectives were quietly piecing together a timeline that made less sense by the hour. According to Julian's initial statement to investigators, he had spoken to Lucas on the phone around 9:30 p.m. on the night he disappeared. Julian claimed that Lucas sounded normal, if a bit tired, and had mentioned needing to stop by an ATM before heading down to the diner. But when detectives subpoenaed bank records, they discovered that Lucas's cards hadn't been used anywhere in the metro area that night. Furthermore, phone records from 1997 were far less precise than modern cellular tracking, relying on coarse tower handoffs that could only narrow a caller's location down to a broad multi-mile sector. What the records did show, however, was a 3-minute call originating from a payphone near University Boulevard at 10:15 p.m., a call placed to Julian's home landline. When questioned about the payphone call, Julian explained that Lucas had called him to say he was running late because his car was struggling to start in the extreme cold. It was a completely plausible explanation. Dozens of vehicles had broken down across the city that night due to freezing fuel lines. But as detectives dove deeper into the personal lives of the two men, microscopic hairline fractures began to appear in the smooth, flawless narrative of their lifelong friendship. Friends from their shared social circle whispered about recent tension between the two. Lucas had recently received a major promotion at his architectural firm, securing a lucrative partnership track that elevated his financial and social standing. Julian, meanwhile, had experienced a series of frustrating setbacks, including a failed business venture and mounting personal debts. It was a subtle, unspoken dynamic, the classic divide between the friend who was surging ahead and the friend who felt left behind in the dust. Despite these subtle undertones, detectives had no physical evidence linking anyone to a crime. In 1997, forensic technology was light years away from the hyper-advanced biometric capabilities of today. The interior of the Ford Explorer was processed using standard black fingerprint powder and ninhydrin sprays, but the freezing temperatures had severely compromised the lift quality of latent prints on the cold vinyl and glass. Dozens of smudged, unusable prints were documented, but none yielded a definitive match. DNA profiling was in its infancy, expensive, slow, and requiring large biological samples like wet blood or saliva, neither of which were present in the vehicle. The cold case division was left with a horrifying vacuum. No body, no crime scene, no weapon, and no direct evidence of foul play. As weeks turned into months, and spring thaws melted the thick snowpack across the Rockies, the trail grew ice cold. The headlines faded from the front pages, the missing flyers turned yellow and tore away from telephone poles, and the file for Lucas Bennett was closed and carried down into the subterranean archives of the Denver Police Department headquarters. For 30 years, that cardboard box sat on a dark steel shelf in the basement vault, designated with a faded red stamp, Case 97 to 60,411, Unsolved Missing Persons / Suspected Homicide. The world outside moved on at a dizzying pace. The turn of the millennium came and went. Smart devices replaced landlines, analog records were converted into digital clouds, and modern forensic laboratories learned how to extract genetic profiles from invisible skin cells left behind by a gentle touch. But down in the dark, time remained frozen in November 1997. Julian Vance built a quiet, respectable life in the suburbs, eventually marrying, raising a family, and retiring from a long career in commercial real estate. To his neighbors, he was a mild-mannered, friendly man who occasionally spoke with a somber tone about the tragedy of his youth, the best friend who had vanished into the Colorado mountains and was never seen again. He believed the past was buried forever beneath 3 decades of dust, administrative turnover, and forgotten leads. He believed that nature, time, and the sheer silence of the mountains had granted him total immunity. He was wrong, because while humans forget, while witnesses age and memories fade, physical evidence possesses an immortal patience. It does not decay, it does not lie, and it does not forgive. And in the winter of 2026, a routine audit of legacy cold case files under Denver's newly formed Operation Mountain Justice was about to pull Case 97 to 60,411 back into the blinding light of truth, unraveling a 30-year-old lie with the microscopic tip of a single, forgotten clue. The heavy steel door of the Denver Police Department's specialized forensic repository swung open with a hydraulic hiss, releasing a cold blast of climate-controlled air into the corridor. It was January 2026, 29 years after Lucas Bennett had disappeared into the freezing November night. Inside the climate-controlled archive, Detective Evelyn Carter stood before a row of high-density mobile shelving units holding the legacy files of Operation Mountain Justice. Carter, a seasoned investigator with a sharp eye for procedural detail and a background in forensic anthropology, had been tasked with leading the precinct's renewed push into unsolved violent crimes from the late 1990s. Armed with modern multispectral scanning tools, deep learning biometric algorithms, and high-sensitivity nuclear DNA extraction kits, her team was re-examining dozens of cases where physical evidence had been preserved but never fully analyzed under 21st-century scientific standards. When her hand rested on the faded cardboard container marked Case 97 to 60,411, she was not looking for a miracle. She was looking for a single microscopic oversight. The original evidence ledger from 1997 listed 16 distinct physical items recovered from Lucas Bennett's dark blue 1995 Ford Explorer. There were the unopened pack of cigarettes, the folded paper roadmap of the Denver metro area, the heavy winter coat abandoned on the passenger seat, and several latent print lifts preserved on clear acetate tape. But it was item E97-0 that immediately caught Carter's attention, a small, dark plastic casing recovered from the driver's side floorboard, right beside the accelerator pedal. In the original 1997 evidence log, the item had been briefly described as a broken plastic fragment, origin unknown, non-essential. At the time, field technicians had assumed it was merely a piece of broken interior trim from the older vehicle. However, as Carter held the plastic fragment beneath the bright LED lights of the forensic cleanroom, her specialized knowledge of late 90s automotive interiors immediately told her something was wrong. The fragment was not part of a Ford Explorer. It was a molded latch casing from a high-end European sedan, specifically a BMW 3 Series. Records from the original 1997 missing person file indicated that in November of that year, while Lucas Bennett was driving a modest Ford SUV, his closest friend, Julian Vance, was driving a silver 1996 BMW 328i, a vehicle he was notoriously proud of maintaining in pristine condition. Carter immediately pulled the 1997 transcript of Julian Vance's initial witness interview. In that interview, conducted 3 days after Bennett went missing, Julian had explicitly stated that he had not been inside Lucas's Ford Explorer for over 2 weeks prior to the disappearance. He swore under oath that on the night of November 14th, he had remained at his home in South Denver waiting for Lucas's call, never touching or approaching his friend's SUV. If that statement was true, how had a broken interior component from a 1996 BMW ended up wedged directly beneath the accelerator pedal of Bennett's abandoned vehicle in Cherry Creek State Park? Carter immediately transferred item E97-04 to the Trace Evidence Lab, where senior forensic geneticist Dr. Eris Thorne was preparing to deploy touch DNA recovery techniques that were utterly unimaginable to crime scene technicians in 1997. Back then, recovering a DNA profile required a visible, fluid biological sample, blood, saliva, or semen. Today, scientists could extract full genetic profiles from low-copy human skin cells left behind by a brief touch, even if those cells were trapped beneath microscopic layers of dust, oil, and atmospheric degradation. Dr. Thorne utilized an advanced wet vacuum sampling system, a device that uses a sterile, high-pressure saline spray to flush minute cellular particles out of microscopic crevices on physical surfaces, collecting the fluid in a high-efficiency vacuum trap. The target was not the smooth outer surface of the plastic casing, but the jagged, rough edges of the fracture line where the piece had snapped off under physical force. While the forensic lab began the delicate process of genetic extraction, Detective Carter initiated a complete digital reconstruction of the telecommunications data from November 14, 1997. In the late 90s, cellular tower data was rudimentary, providing only coarse sector maps that covered vast geographical areas. But using modern spatial analysis software and historic network topology maps provided by telecommunications engineers, Carter's team was able to perform a retroanalysis of the call logs associated with both Lucas Bennett's home telephone line and Julian Vance's landline. The historic records revealed something that had completely escaped the original investigating team. At 10:15 p.m. on the night of the disappearance, the exact moment Julian claimed Lucas had called him from a payphone on University Boulevard, a second incoming call had been logged on Julian's home phone system. It was an automated voicemail notification indicating an unanswered call originating from a cellular tower sector that covered Cherry Creek State Park, miles away from University Boulevard, and directly over the lonely access road where Bennett's vehicle was discovered 2 days later. The realization hit the investigative team like a physical blow. The payphone narrative was a complete fabrication. The timeline that had stood as the absolute foundation of the investigation for nearly 30 years was built entirely on a lie. Julian Vance had not been sitting at home waiting for a phone call. He had been positioned in or near Cherry Creek State Park at the very moment his best friend's life was being erased. Why had the original detectives missed it? In 1997, the sheer volume of paper call logs, combined with the lack of unified digital cross-referencing tools, meant that an automated system ping-buried on page 47 of a 100-page phone company bill went completely unnoticed. The original investigators had trusted Julian Vance implicitly. He was the heartbroken best friend, the weeping spokesman at the press conferences, the man printing flyers with his own money. His grief had been his greatest shield, deflecting suspicion and blinding investigators to the terrifying possibility that the predator was sitting right across the interview table. 48 hours later, Dr. Eris Thorne called Detective Carter into the genetic lab. On the high-resolution displays mounted above the workstation was an electropherogram, a complex, peak and valley chart representing a fully resolved male nuclear DNA profile extracted from the fracture line of the plastic BMW casing. The sample was degraded, but using short tandem repeat amplification, we pulled a flawless single-source profile, Dr. Thorne explained, pointing a stylus at the glowing green peaks on the screen. We didn't just find background skin cells. We found a concentration of biological material trapped in the plastic snap fracture that indicates the piece was broken off by someone exerting significant physical force with their bare hands. Carter immediately cross-referenced the newly generated profile against state and federal offender databases, but as expected for a man with no prior criminal record, no automated match appeared. However, under the expanded authority of Operation Mountain Justice, Carter obtained a sealed judicial warrant to access consumer genealogical databases, utilizing advanced forensic genetic genealogy to trace the mystery profile through distant familial lines. Within 72 hours, the genetic mapping software returned a terrifyingly precise result. The DNA extracted from the broken piece of a BMW found in Lucas Bennett's abandoned car belonged to a direct paternal relative of a family line rooted in South Denver, a line that led straight to 64-year-old Julian Vance. The room fell into an eerie, heavy silence. The scientific evidence was undeniable. 34 years of carefully maintained deception were suddenly undone by an invisible cluster of skin cells trapped inside a tiny piece of snapped plastic. The best friend who had organized the vigils, who had cried in front of television cameras, who had sworn he hadn't been near Lucas's car, was linked directly to the crime scene by his own genetic signature. But Carter knew that a single piece of trace evidence, no matter how scientifically sound, was only the first step in dismantling a 3-decade-old lie. They needed to know what happened on that frozen night in Cherry Creek State Park. They needed to find out why a lifelong friendship had ended in a brutal, hidden murder, and most importantly, they needed to locate where Julian Vance had buried the body of Lucas Bennett before time ran out completely. The heavy steel door of the Denver Police Department's specialized forensic repository swung open with a hydraulic hiss, releasing a cold blast of climate-controlled air into the corridor. It was January 2026, 29 years after Lucas Bennett had disappeared into the freezing November night. Inside the climate-controlled archive, Detective Evelyn Carter stood before a row of high-density mobile shelving units holding the legacy files of Operation Mountain Justice. Carter, a seasoned investigator with a sharp eye for procedural detail and a background in forensic anthropology, had been tasked with leading the precinct's renewed push into unsolved violent crimes from the late 1990s. Armed with modern multispectral scanning tools, deep learning biometric algorithms, and high-sensitivity nuclear DNA extraction kits, her team was re-examining dozens of cases where physical evidence had been preserved but never fully analyzed under 21st-century scientific standards. When her hand rested on the faded cardboard container marked case 97-60,411, she was not looking for a miracle. She was looking for a single microscopic oversight. The original evidence ledger from 1997 listed 16 distinct physical items recovered from Lucas Bennett's dark blue 1995 Ford Explorer. There were the unopened pack of cigarettes, the folded paper roadmap of the Denver metro area, the heavy winter coat abandoned on the passenger seat, and several latent print lifts preserved on clear acetate tape. But it was item E97-04 that immediately caught Carter's attention, a small, dark plastic casing recovered from the driver's side floorboard, right beside the accelerator pedal. In the original 1997 evidence log, the item had been briefly described as a broken plastic fragment, origin unknown, non-essential. At the time, field technicians had assumed it was merely a piece of broken interior trim from the older vehicle. However, as Carter held the plastic fragment beneath the bright LED lights of the forensic cleanroom, her specialized knowledge of late 90s automotive interiors immediately told her something was wrong. The fragment was not part of a Ford Explorer. It was a molded latch casing from a high-end European sedan, specifically a BMW 3 Series. Records from the original 1997 missing person file indicated that in November of that year, while Lucas Bennett was driving a modest Ford SUV, his closest friend, Julian Vance, was driving a silver 1996 BMW 328i, a vehicle he was notoriously proud of maintaining in pristine condition. Carter immediately pulled the 1997 transcript of Julian Vance's initial witness interview. In that interview, conducted 3 days after Bennett went missing, Julian had explicitly stated that he had not been inside Lucas's Ford Explorer for over 2 weeks prior to the disappearance. He swore under oath that on the night of November 14th, he had remained at his home in South Denver waiting for Lucas's call, never touching or approaching his friend's SUV. If that statement was true, how had a broken interior component from a 1996 BMW ended up wedged directly beneath the accelerator pedal of Bennett's abandoned vehicle in Cherry Creek State Park? Carter immediately transferred item E97-04 to the Trace Evidence Lab, where senior forensic geneticist Dr. Eris Thorne was preparing to deploy touch DNA recovery techniques that were utterly unimaginable to crime scene technicians in 1997. Back then, recovering a DNA profile required a visible, fluid biological sample, blood, saliva, or semen. Today, scientists could extract full genetic profiles from low-copy human skin cells left behind by a brief touch, even if those cells were trapped beneath microscopic layers of dust, oil, and atmospheric degradation. Dr. Thorne utilized an advanced wet vacuum sampling system, a device that uses a sterile, high-pressure saline spray to flush minute cellular particles out of microscopic crevices on physical surfaces, collecting the fluid in a high-efficiency vacuum trap. The target was not the smooth outer surface of the plastic casing, but the jagged, rough edges of the fracture line where the piece had snapped off under physical force. While the forensic lab began the delicate process of genetic extraction, Detective Carter initiated a complete digital reconstruction of the telecommunications data from November 14, 1997. In the late 90s, cellular tower data was rudimentary, providing only coarse sector maps that covered vast geographical areas. But using modern spatial analysis software and historic network topology maps provided by telecommunications engineers, Carter's team was able to perform a retroanalysis of the call logs associated with both Lucas Bennett's home telephone line and Julian Vance's landline. The historic records revealed something that had completely escaped the original investigating team. At 10:15 p.m. on the night of the disappearance, the exact moment Julian claimed Lucas had called him from a payphone on University Boulevard, a second incoming call had been logged on Julian's home phone system. It was an automated voicemail notification indicating an unanswered call originating from a cellular tower sector that covered Cherry Creek State Park, miles away from University Boulevard, and directly over the lonely access road where Bennett's vehicle was discovered 2 days later. The realization hit the investigative team like a physical blow. The payphone narrative was a complete fabrication. The timeline that had stood as the absolute foundation of the investigation for nearly 30 years was built entirely on a lie. Julian Vance had not been sitting at home waiting for a phone call. He had been positioned in or near Cherry Creek State Park at the very moment his best friend's life was being erased. Why had the original detectives missed it? In 1997, the sheer volume of paper call logs, combined with the lack of unified digital cross-referencing tools, meant that an automated system ping-buried on page 47 of a 100-page phone company bill went completely unnoticed. The original investigators had trusted Julian Vance implicitly. He was the heartbroken best friend, the weeping spokesman at the press conferences, the man printing flyers with his own money. His grief had been his greatest shield, deflecting suspicion and blinding investigators to the terrifying possibility that the predator was sitting right across the interview table. 48 hours later, Dr. Eris Thorne called Detective Carter into the genetic lab. On the high-resolution displays mounted above the workstation was an electropherogram, a complex, peak and valley chart representing a fully resolved male nuclear DNA profile extracted from the fracture line of the plastic BMW casing. The sample was degraded, but using short tandem repeat amplification, we pulled a flawless single-source profile, Dr. Thorne explained, pointing a stylus at the glowing green peaks on the screen. We didn't just find background skin cells. We found a concentration of biological material trapped in the plastic snap fracture that indicates the piece was broken off by someone exerting significant physical force with their bare hands. Carter immediately cross-referenced the newly generated profile against state and federal offender databases, but as expected for a man with no prior criminal record, no automated match appeared. However, under the expanded authority of Operation Mountain Justice, Carter obtained a sealed judicial warrant to access consumer genealogical databases, utilizing advanced forensic genetic genealogy to trace the mystery profile through distant familial lines. Within 72 hours, the genetic mapping software returned a terrifyingly precise result. The DNA extracted from the broken piece of a BMW found in Lucas Bennett's abandoned car belonged to a direct paternal relative of a family line rooted in South Denver, a line that led straight to 64-year-old Julian Vance. The room fell into an eerie, heavy silence. The scientific evidence was undeniable. 34 years of carefully maintained deception were suddenly undone by an invisible cluster of skin cells trapped inside a tiny piece of snapped plastic. The best friend who had organized the vigils, who had cried in front of television cameras, who had sworn he hadn't been near Lucas's car, was linked directly to the crime scene by his own genetic signature. But Carter knew that a single piece of trace evidence, no matter how scientifically sound, was only the first step in dismantling a 3-decade-old lie. They needed to know what happened on that frozen night in Cherry Creek State Park. They needed to find out why a lifelong friendship had ended in a brutal, hidden murder, and most importantly, they needed to locate where Julian Vance had buried the body of Lucas Bennett before time ran out completely. The freezing dawn over the Denver metropolitan area broke pale and bitter, painting the jagged peaks of the Front Range in cold shades of violet and slate gray. Inside the third-floor tactical briefing room at the Denver Police Department headquarters, the atmosphere was charged with a quiet, razor-sharp focus. Detective Evelyn Carter stood at the head of a long conference table, surrounding herself with senior homicide investigators, forensic analysts, and representatives from the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office. Mounted on the wall behind her was a massive digital whiteboard displaying a timeline that spanned nearly 3 decades, a visual ledger of deceit that began on a snowy night in November 1997 and led directly to the manicured, tree-lined streets of a quiet suburban neighborhood in South Denver. The digital file on Lucas Bennett was no longer a cold, forgotten cold case file. It was an active, high-priority murder investigation. For 29 years, Julian Vance has lived under the assumption that he got away with the perfect crime, Detective Carter said, her voice cutting through the hum of the room's ventilation system as she pointed a laser at a high-resolution display showing Julian's 1997 mugshot-style witness photo alongside his current driver's license picture. He played the part of the grieving best friend to perfection. He stood in front of local news cameras, he wept on the steps of the municipal courthouse, and he organized search parties across Cherry Creek State Park. But his entire defense rested on a single, bold assertion that he was never inside Lucas Bennett's Ford Explorer on the night of November 14, 1997. Thanks to the touch DNA profile recovered from item E97-04, the snapped interior component of his own 1996 BMW, we now have physical, scientific proof that Vance was not only inside that vehicle, but that he engaged in a violent physical struggle near the driver's accelerator pedal. The room remained motionless as Carter laid out the tactical strategy for the next 24 hours. The objective was clear. Before moving in for a formal arrest, the investigative team needed to construct an airtight financial and psychological profile of Julian Vance leading up to the exact week Lucas disappeared. In late 1997, while the original detectives were focused almost exclusively on searching the freezing wilderness for Bennett's body, the financial paper trails had been largely overlooked. Armed with modern forensic accounting tools and court-ordered subpoenas for legacy bank archives, financial analysts had spent the previous 72 hours unearthing microfilmed records from long-defunct local credit unions and mortgage lenders. What those dusty financial records revealed was a desperate, hidden motive that had remained completely invisible for nearly 30 years. In the fall of 1997, Julian Vance was standing on the precipice of total financial ruin. His independent real estate investment firm was drowning in debt. Several private loans were facing immediate foreclosure, and he was secretly owing over $60,000 to a hardline private lender, an immense sum at the time. Lucas Bennett, conversely, was thriving. He had just secured a junior partnership at his prestigious architectural firm and had recently received a substantial inheritance from his late grandfather's estate, liquid cash sitting in a money market account that Lucas had openly discussed with his closest friend. Further examination of bank transaction ledgers from the morning of November 14, 1997, just 12 hours before Lucas disappeared, yielded a staggering piece of missing evidence. A cashier's check in the amount of $45,000 had been drawn from Lucas Bennett's personal account, made payable directly to a shell corporation controlled by Julian Vance. Attached to the bank's internal authorization slip was a handwritten note signed by Lucas, specifying that the funds were a short-term, personal loan intended to be repaid within 90 days. But when forensic document examiners compared the signature on that check with known samples of Lucas's handwriting, the truth became instantly terrifying. The signature was a forged document, a skilled, painstaking imitation executed by someone who had intimate, unfettered access to Lucas's personal files and financial documents. Lucas discovered the forgery on the night he disappeared, Carter explained, her laser pointer tracking across a digitized copy of the $45,000 check on the screen. We reconstructed the timeline. On the afternoon of November 14th, Lucas visited his bank branch downtown to balance his monthly accounts. He saw the massive withdrawal, demanded a copy of the canceled check, and realized that his closest friend in the world had stolen his life savings. When Lucas called Julian that evening, it wasn't to plan a casual dinner at a local diner. It was an ultimatum. Lucas confronted him, demanding an immediate meeting to address the theft before he went straight to the district attorney's office. The financial motive was now crystal clear, but the logistical puzzle of the crime scene at Cherry Creek State Park remained to be fully unraveled. How had Julian managed to ambush his friend, dispose of his body in the freezing wilderness, and return to his daily routine without leaving behind a single drop of blood or a visible trace of violence inside the vehicle? To answer that question, Carter turned to Dr. Eris Thorne, who brought up a 3D volumetric laser model of the 1995 Ford Explorer's cabin interior. When we re-examined the original high-intensity optical photos taken of the vehicle's interior in 1997, Dr. Thorne said, adjusting the virtual camera angle on the screen, we noticed something that the initial crime scene techs had dismissed as simple atmospheric condensation. The passenger side dashboard, the inner door panel, and the upper section of the windshield showed faint, microscopic spray patterns of an airborne aerosol solvent, specifically heavy-duty industrial ether, a volatile compound commonly used in auto repair shops at the time to start cold engines. If an assailant seated in the passenger seat sprayed a concentrated dose of industrial ether directly into the face of an unsuspecting driver in an enclosed vehicle, the victim would lose consciousness within 5 to 10 seconds. There would be no broken glass, no gunshot wounds, and no massive blood spattering. Just a silent, suffocating incapacitation. The physical evidence was assembling like the interlocking pieces of a dark, horrific puzzle. Julian Vance had lured his best friend out into the freezing night under the pretense of settling the financial dispute in person. Once inside the cabin of Lucas's Ford Explorer parked in the isolated darkness of Cherry Creek State Park, Julian had deployed the chemical agent, overpowering Lucas before he had any chance to defend himself or reach the ignition. During the silent, desperate struggle that ensued, Julian's foot had kicked violently against the lower dash panel, snapping the plastic casing off his own BMW key fob or interior trim that he was carrying in his pocket, a tiny, broken fragment that tumbled unnoticed into the dark recesses beneath the accelerator pedal, where it would lay buried for nearly 3 decades. Armed with the new forensic findings, the financial forgery records, and the touch DNA match, Detective Carter walked into the chambers of a Denver County District Court judge at 2 p.m. 20 minutes later, she walked out carrying a signed, high-priority warrant for the arrest of 64-year-old Julian Vance on charges of first-degree murder, aggravated kidnapping, and grand larceny. As twilight began to settle over the city, a convoy of unmarked police cruisers silently navigated the quiet, snow-covered residential streets of South Denver. The target was a handsome, two-story brick residence on Elmwood Drive, the home where Julian Vance had spent 30 years cultivating the image of an upright, respected community member, a loving father, and a devoted friend who had never quite recovered from the tragic loss of his childhood buddy. The street was peaceful, illuminated by the warm, amber glow of streetlights reflecting off untouched snow banks. Neighbors were pulling into their driveways, returning home from work, entirely oblivious to the fact that the quiet, gray-haired man who lived at number 42 was about to face the ultimate reckoning of his life. Detective Carter, wearing a heavy tactical jacket with her police badge displayed prominently around her neck, stepped out of the lead cruiser alongside 3 tactical officers. They moved quickly up the concrete walkway, their boots crunching softly in the fresh snow. Carter took a deep breath, feeling the cold air hit her lungs, and struck the heavy oak front door 3 times with a firm, authoritative knock. "Denver Police Department," she announced, her voice echoing clearly in the silent neighborhood. "Open the door." Inside, through the decorative glass panel beside the entryway, a shadow moved slowly toward the door. When the latch finally turned and the heavy oak door swung open, a tall, silver-haired man wearing an elegant wool sweater stood in the warm light of the hallway. Julian Vance looked healthy, remarkably well-preserved for 64, with clear blue eyes and a calm, polite expression. But as his gaze drifted past Detective Carter and landed on the tactical officers standing on his porch, followed by the sight of 4 unmarked cruisers blocking his driveway, the color drained from his face with sickening speed. "Julian Vance," Detective Evelyn Carter said, her voice dropping into a cold, unwavering register as she pulled a pair of steel handcuffs from her belt. "You are under arrest for the November 1997 murder of Lucas Bennett. You have the right to remain silent." For a long, agonizing second, Julian didn't speak. He didn't scream, he didn't run, and he didn't offer a dramatic protestation of innocence. His eyes simply shifted down to the steel handcuffs in Carter's hands, and a faint, involuntary tremor passed through his lower lip. The smooth, impenetrable mask of quiet grief he had worn for 29 years didn't just crack. It completely disintegrated, exposing the hollow, terrified soul of a man who realized that the past had finally caught up to him. The cold night of 1997 had finally ended, and the dark truth was about to be dragged kicking and screaming into the light. The cold metal of the handcuffs clicked tightly around Julian Vance's wrists, the sharp, mechanical sound cutting through the quiet evening air of Elmwood Drive like a blade. He offered no physical resistance as Detective Evelyn Carter led him down his snow-dusted front walk toward the rear door of the lead unmarked cruiser. His eyes remained fixed on the ground, his silver hair catching the flickering blue light of the police cruisers that now illuminated the quiet suburban street. Neighbors stepped out onto their porches in the freezing cold, wrapped in heavy coats, watching in stunned disbelief as the mild-mannered real estate agent, a man who had lived among them for decades, hosted summer barbecues and offered quiet condolences whenever tragedy struck the neighborhood, was loaded into the back of a law enforcement vehicle. To the world, he was a pillar of suburban respectability. To the officers holding his arms, he was a cold, calculating predator whose 3-decade run of freedom had just reached its absolute end. Inside the third-floor interrogation room at the Denver Police Department headquarters, the temperature was kept deliberately cool. The room was sparse, a long metal table, 3 chairs, and a large one-way mirror that reflected the harsh, fluorescent lights overhead. Julian Vance sat at the center of the table, his hands cuffed in front of him, staring blankly at a paper cup of water he hadn't touched. Across from him sat Detective Evelyn Carter and Senior Homicide Detective Marcus Reyes, a veteran investigator brought in to assist with the high-stakes questioning. On the table between them rested a single, thick leather binder containing 29 years of case files, financial audits, and the newly generated genetic analysis reports. "For 29 years, Julian, you built a life on top of a grave," Detective Carter began, her voice calm, measured, and completely devoid of hostility. She opened the binder, sliding a high-resolution photograph across the metal surface. It was a picture of the broken plastic BMW key casing recovered from the floorboard of Lucas Bennett's Ford Explorer in 1997. You told the original investigating team that you hadn't been inside Lucas's car for 2 weeks prior to his disappearance. You swore under oath that you were sitting at home on the night of November 14th, waiting for him to call. But Touch DNA doesn't care about sworn statements. It doesn't care about tears shed at press conferences. We pulled your nuclear DNA from the fracture line of this plastic piece, trapped right beneath his accelerator pedal, where you kicked it during the struggle. Julian stared down at the photograph. A faint, involuntary twitch passed through his jaw, but his lips remained tightly pressed together. He slowly leaned back in his chair, folding his cuffed hands in his lap. "I loved Lucas like a brother," he whispered, his voice raspy and thin, barely audible above the hum of the room's ventilation system. "We grew up together. I spent 30 years wishing I knew what happened to him that night. That piece of plastic. I don't know how it got there. Maybe I dropped it weeks earlier. Maybe he borrowed my keys. You're trying to build a monster out of scraps because you need to close an old case." Detective Reyes leaned forward, resting his forearms on the table, his dark eyes locking onto Julian's gaze with intense, unwavering focus. "We aren't building a monster out of scraps, Julian. We built a timeline out of cold, hard cash." Reyes pulled out a second document, a digitized copy of the $45,000 cashier's check drawn from Lucas Bennett's personal bank account on the morning of November 14th, 1997. Alongside it, he placed an enlarged side-by-side comparison of Lucas's authentic signature and the forged signature on the authorization slip. "You were bankrupt in 1997. Your investment firm was failing, your private loans were in default, and you were days away from losing everything. You forged your best friend's name to steal his life savings. Lucas found out that afternoon. He didn't call you to plan a dinner at the diner, Julian. He called you because he realized the man he trusted most in the world was a thief." The air in the interrogation room grew heavy, suffocatingly quiet. Julian's eyes flicked to the forged signature, then back to Reyes. For the first time since his arrest, the serene, unflappable composure he had maintained began to fray at the edges. His breathing shallow, his fingers tightened around his wrists, the metal links of the handcuffs clinking softly against the table. "You don't understand how things were back then," Julian muttered, his voice dropping into a dark, defensive register. "I was under unbelievable pressure. It was supposed to be a temporary loan. I was going to replace the money before he even noticed. I had a deal coming through that would have covered everything." "Except the deal didn't come through, did it?" Carter interjected softly, leaning in close. "And Lucas didn't let it slide. He confronted you. He told you he was going to the district attorney's office if you didn't return the funds immediately. You luring him out to Cherry Creek State Park wasn't a desperate attempt to talk things over, Julian. It was an ambush. You brought industrial ether into that car. You incapacitated him while he sat in his own driver's seat, completely defenseless, trusting you until the second he lost consciousness." Julian closed his eyes tightly, shaking his head side to side as if trying to physically block out the detective's words. "It wasn't like that," he snapped, his voice suddenly rising in anger, shedding its mild-mannered suburban veneer. "He was yelling at me. He was going to ruin my life over a temporary mistake. 30 years of friendship, and he was ready to throw me to the wolves over a financial disagreement. He wouldn't listen to reason. I just wanted him to calm down. I just wanted him to stop talking." The room went dead silent. Detective Carter and Detective Reyes exchanged a quick, knowing glance. The admission, though partial, was a devastating crack in the defense. Julian Vance had just acknowledged the confrontation, the motive, and the explosive argument inside the vehicle. The image of the heartbroken best friend weeping on the courthouse steps in 1997 was officially shattered forever. "Where is he, Julian?" Carter asked gently, leaning across the table, her voice dropping into an empathetic, almost whisper-like tone. "Where did you put him after he lost consciousness?" His family spent nearly 3 decades staring out the window, waiting for a son who was never coming home. His parents died without ever knowing where their boy was buried. Give them peace. Give yourself peace. Tell us where Lucas is. Julian opened his eyes slowly. The arrogant, self-preservational wall he had maintained for 29 years briefly flickered, revealing a deep, bottomless pit of exhaustion. He looked at the photographs of his youth, at the forged check, at the genetic reports that had dismantled his entire life in a matter of hours. It was so cold that night, Julian whispered, his gaze drifting toward the mirror on the wall, staring into nothingness. The ground was like iron. You couldn't dig. You couldn't do anything. He paused, taking a long, shuddering breath, then slowly shook his head, clamping his mouth shut once more as the instinct for self-preservation reasserted itself. I want my lawyer, he said flatly, his voice hardening back into stone. I have nothing more to say. Detective Carter stood up, gathering the documents from the table and sliding them neatly back into the leather binder. You don't have to say another word, Julian, she said, looking down at him with quiet, unyielding authority. The science has already spoken for you, and we're going to find him, with or without your help. While Julian Vance was escorted down to a holding cell in the basement of the precinct to await his formal arraignment, the investigative engine of Operation Mountain Justice shifted into high gear. A team of specialized search personnel, accompanied by forensic geologists and cadaver dog handlers, was already assembling on the outskirts of Cherry Creek State Park. They were equipped with ground-penetrating radar arrays, high-resolution thermal drone mapping systems, and deep soil core sampling units, technology that could read the subterranean layers of the Earth as easily as a book. The winter storm that had protected Julian Vance's secret in November 1997 was long gone, and the ground was about to yield the final, tragic secret it had kept for nearly 30 years. The frigid morning air over Cherry Creek State Park was thick with heavy, low-hanging fog that clung to the snow-covered brush and twisted branches of the cottonwood trees. A tactical search convoy comprising state police vehicles, mobile command trailers, and specialized forensic equipment trucks crept slowly down the unpaved access road, their tires crunching heavily through thick ruts of frozen mud and slush. It was the exact same desolate stretch of wilderness where Lucas Bennett's dark blue Ford Explorer had been discovered nearly 3 decades prior. But on this freezing morning, the search team was not relying on visual sweeps, plastic markers, or wooden probes. They were deploying state-of-the-art geophysical detection arrays capable of mapping subterranean anomalies down to microscopic densities, peering through feet of frozen earth to reclaim a truth that had been buried in the dark since 1997. At the edge of the tree line, Detective Evelyn Carter stood alongside Dr. Eris Thorne and a team of forensic geophysicists from the Colorado Geological Survey. A specialized heavy-duty drone, fitted with a high-resolution LiDAR camera and ground-penetrating radar emitters, hovered steadily 30 feet above the snow, sweeping a precise grid pattern across a 3-acre quadrant of dense brushland. In November of 1997, the ground here was frozen solid, Dr. Thorne explained, pulling up a real-time thermal topographical map on his tablet screen. Julian Vance was working against time, extreme cold, and physical exhaustion. He couldn't dig a standard, deep grave in packed clay under sub-zero conditions. He needed a natural depression, an abandoned drainage culvert, a root cave beneath a fallen tree, or a natural soil subsidence zone, somewhere he could quickly conceal a body beneath loose rocks, leaf litter, and heavy snow drifts. The high-frequency ground-penetrating radar pulses penetrated 6 feet beneath the frozen topsoil, transmitting detailed density cross-sections directly to the mobile command center. For hours, the screens displayed nothing but uniform layers of gravel, clay, and bedrock. But at 1:45 p.m., as the drone completed its 7th pass over a low-lying marshy depression located roughly 400 yards northeast of where the Explorer had been parked, the audio monitor emitted a steady, continuous tone. A distinct, localized anomaly appeared on the high-definition display, a oval-shaped disturbance in the natural soil stratification, measuring roughly 6 feet in length, buried 4 feet beneath an old, partially collapsed concrete drainage culvert that had been installed during early highway construction in the late 1980s. Search teams moved in immediately, securing the perimeter with yellow crime scene tape and erecting a heated, heavy-duty weather enclosure directly over the target site to protect the delicate ground from falling snow and freezing winds. Forensic anthropologists equipped with delicate hand tools, soft brushes, and fine mesh sifting screens began the painstaking process of removing the frozen topsoil layer by layer. The atmosphere inside the heated enclosure was suffocatingly tense, filled only with the rhythmic sound of metal trowels scraping gently against packed earth and the steady breathing of the excavation crew. Every bucket of dirt removed was carefully cataloged, weighed, and processed through multi-stage sifting stations to ensure no microscopic piece of trace evidence was lost. By late afternoon, 3 feet down into the dark, compacted earth beneath the concrete culvert, the trowel of a senior forensic anthropologist struck a dense, non-metallic object with a soft, dull thud. The team halted work instantly. Working under high-intensity LED floodlights, the technicians used soft horsehair brushes to clear away the dark, damp soil, revealing the unmistakable weave of heavy indigo denim fabric, preserved remarkably well by the anaerobic, freezing conditions of the clay soil. As the brushes continued their delicate work, the dark denim yielded to the frayed hem of a flannel shirt, a pair of leather hiking boots, and a gold university class ring still resting upon a skeletal finger. Engraved on the inside band of the ring, perfectly legible beneath a thin layer of mineral oxidation, were the initials L. A. B. 1993. Lucas Bennett had finally been found. The discovery sent a shockwave through the Denver Police Department headquarters, signaling the definitive end of a 30-year search and providing the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office with the ultimate, indisputable physical evidence needed to secure a first-degree murder conviction. Forensic pathologists from the Office of the Medical Examiner carefully recovered the remains, transporting them under armed escort to the state mortuary facility for comprehensive autopsy and osteological analysis. Preliminary examination confirmed the absence of gunshot trauma or heavy blunt force skeletal fractures, reinforcing the prosecution's theory that Lucas had been rendered unconscious by industrial ether inside the vehicle before succumbing to chemical asphyxiation and severe hypothermia within the confines of the freezing culvert. Back inside the third-floor conference room, Detective Carter placed a confidential call to the surviving members of Lucas Bennett's family, his younger sister, Claire Bennett, who had spent nearly 3 decades carrying the agonizing weight of her brother's unsolved disappearance. "Claire," Carter said softly, her voice filled with a quiet, grounded authority, "we brought Lucas home today." On the other end of the line, miles away in a quiet house in suburban Seattle, a long, trembling exhale echoed through the speaker, a sound carrying 30 years of suppressed grief, unanswered questions, and phantom hopes finally surrendering to the absolute, unyielding peace of the truth. Meanwhile, inside the high-security booking cell at the Denver County Jail, Julian Vance sat on a stainless steel bench, staring blankly at the gray concrete floor. His court-appointed defense attorney had just stepped out after delivering the catastrophic news from Cherry Creek State Park. The legal maneuvers, the plausible denials, and the manufactured doubts that had protected him for nearly 30 years had completely crumbled. The touch DNA extracted from the broken plastic piece under the gas pedal, the forged $45,000 check, and the physical recovery of Lucas Bennett's body from the exact location identified by spatial cell tower analysis left the defense with zero room to maneuver. The prosecution had constructed an ironclad case, backed by the infallible discipline of modern science and 30 years of unyielding police work. 2 days later, during a packed, highly publicized arraignment hearing at the Denver District Courthouse, 64-year-old Julian Vance stood before the judge, clad in an orange inmate jumpsuit with heavy iron chains securing his wrists and ankles. Flashbulbs from news cameras flickered continuously through the glass partition of the gallery as reporters from every major network frantically jotted down notes. When the presiding judge formally read the indictment, charging him with first-degree premeditated murder, felony kidnapping, and grand larceny, Julian lowered his head, his hands trembling so violently that the links of his chains rattled against the wooden defense table. When asked for his plea, his high-priced criminal defense attorney stepped forward, announcing to the crowded courtroom that his client wished to enter a formal plea of guilty to all charges in exchange for the prosecution removing the death penalty from consideration. The room erupted into a low, collective gasp from the gallery. The man who had wept on television, who had printed missing flyers, who had pretended to be a heartbroken brother for nearly 3 decades, had officially confessed to the cold-blooded murder of his closest childhood friend. In his signed, sworn allocution statement read aloud by the prosecutor, Julian admitted to every horrific detail: the forgery of the check, the confrontation inside the vehicle, the use of industrial ether to overpower Lucas, and the desperate, late-night disposal of the body beneath the icy culvert in Cherry Creek State Park. He admitted that every single tears-filled plea he had made to news cameras in 1997 was a calculated, manipulative lie designed to divert suspicion away from his own financial desperation. 3 months later, at the formal sentencing hearing, the courtroom was packed to absolute capacity with retired detectives, forensic scientists, news reporters, and community members who had followed the mystery since 1997. Claire Bennett stood at the podium, holding a framed photograph of her brother taken during his university graduation. She looked directly at Julian Vance, who sat hunched at the defense table, refusing to meet her eyes. "You took my brother's life because of your own pathetic greed," Claire said, her voice echoing with powerful, crystal-clear resonance throughout the silent courtroom. "You thought time was your partner. You thought the snow and the mountains would keep your secret forever. But you failed to realize that truth doesn't rot. It doesn't fade, and it never stops hunting the guilty." The judge delivered the maximum sentence allowed by law: life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, to be served at the maximum security Colorado State Penitentiary. As the bailiffs led the silver-haired inmate away in chains to begin serving his sentence in a windowless concrete cell, the dark, agonizing chapter that had opened on a freezing November night in 1997 was finally closed forever. The case of Lucas Bennett had transformed from a haunting mystery into a historic testament to the power of modern forensic science, proving to aging criminals everywhere that no crime is buried too deep, no lie is too perfect, and no victim will ever be forgotten by those who seek the light of justice. The heavy double doors of the Colorado State Penitentiary swung shut behind Julian Vance with a sharp, metallic clang that echoed through the sterile, concrete corridors of the maximum security facility. The 64-year-old former real estate developer was now state inmate 199704, stripped of his tailored suits, his suburban home, his standing in the community, and the freedom he had stolen 30 years ago. As he was led down the fluorescent-lit hallway toward his small, windowless cell in the geriatric wing, the weight of his absolute ruin was total. For 3 decades, he had believed that his intelligence, his social charm, and the sheer passage of time had granted him immunity. He had believed that the freezing winds of 1997 had swept away every trace of his crime. But in the end, he had been dismantled not by an eyewitness or a sudden betrayal, but by an invisible collection of skin cells trapped beneath a broken piece of plastic, patiently waiting in the dark until science caught up with his lie. Meanwhile, back at the Denver Police Department headquarters, Detective Evelyn Carter sat at her desk, compiling the final post-adjudication report for case 97 to 60,411. The physical evidence that had brought down Julian Vance, the touch DNA extracted from the broken BMW casing, the forged cashier's check, the spatial cell tower reconstructions, and the ground-penetrating radar scans, was being systematically prepared for permanent transfer to the State Forensic Archives. The case had become an instant national benchmark for cold case investigations, studied intensely at police academies, FBI training centers, and university criminology departments across the country. It was hailed as a masterclass in how legacy physical evidence, when combined with modern multispectral technology and unyielding investigative discipline, could shatter decades of silence and hold even the most sophisticated criminals accountable. Across the room, Dr. Eris Thorne was preparing a technical paper for the Journal of Forensic Sciences, detailing the specialized wet vacuum sampling techniques used to extract high-quality nuclear DNA from degraded, 30-year-old plastic components. What the Bennett case proved to the scientific community, Dr. Thorne noted during a departmental debriefing, is that physical evidence possesses an immortal patience. Human memory degrades, witnesses move away or pass on, and alibis blur into the background noise of history. But a touch DNA profile or a microscopic chemical deposit locked inside a physical matrix does not alter its story. It doesn't care if 20 days or 29 years have passed. It holds the truth in stasis, waiting for us to develop the eyes to see it. The emotional aftermath of the trial continued to resonate deeply throughout the Denver metropolitan area. For the neighbors who had lived alongside Julian Vance on Elmwood Drive, the revelation of his guilt served as a chilling reminder of the complexity of human deception. The polite, silver-haired neighbor who had helped clear snow from their driveways and hosted annual summer block parties had carried the dark secret of a brutal murder in his heart for half his life. The house on Elmwood Drive was put up for sale by Vance's estranged family, its empty rooms standing as a silent monument to a double life that had finally collapsed under the relentless weight of the truth. For Claire Bennett and the surviving members of the Bennett family, the recovery of Lucas's remains from Cherry Creek State Park brought a profound, long-awaited peace. On a bright, clear morning in early spring, a private memorial service was held at a quiet cemetery overlooking the foothills of the Rocky Mountains. Friends, former colleagues, and members of the investigative team gathered to pay their respects to the young, talented architect whose life had been so violently interrupted in 1997. Lucas was finally laid to rest beside his parents, who had spent their final years yearning for answers that only time and science could provide. The agonizing question mark that had hung over the Bennett family for nearly 3 decades was officially replaced by a permanent, dignified headstone. Back at the precinct, the success of Case 97 to 60,411 breathed new life into Operation Mountain Justice. Inspired by the resolution of the Lucas Bennett case, the Cold Case Division received expanded state funding and state-of-the-art equipment upgrades, allowing Detective Carter's team to begin systematic reviews of dozens of other unsolved cases from the late 1980s and 1990s. The dusty cardboard boxes resting on the subterranean steel shelves of the basement archive were no longer viewed as dead ends, but as unresolved puzzles waiting for their own technological awakenings. Every file held the potential for a breakthrough, every item of legacy evidence a possible key to unmasking a killer who believed they were safe in the shadows. As twilight began to fall over the snow-capped peaks of the Rockies, Detective Evelyn Carter walked out onto the front steps of the Denver Police Department headquarters. The cool mountain air was fresh and clear, carrying the faint scent of pine from the western ridges. She pulled her coat tightly around her shoulders, looking out over the glowing skyline of the city. The ghost of Lucas Bennett was no longer wandering in the freezing darkness under a concrete culvert in Cherry Creek State Park. He had been brought home, his story restored to the light, and his killer consigned to the quiet obscurity of a prison cell. Carter took a deep breath, adjusted her satchel containing the next legacy case file, and stepped down into the evening, ready to continue the endless, necessary work of speaking for those whose voices had been silenced by the past. The early morning sun broke over the eastern horizon, casting a long, pale golden hue across the polished granite steps of the Denver Police Department headquarters. Inside the third-floor squad room, the quiet hum of air filtration systems and electronic server banks replaced the chaotic tension that had dominated the floor during the final weeks of the Lucas Bennett investigation. Detective Evelyn Carter sat at her primary workstation, staring at the newly minted digital archive ledger on her screen. Case 97 to 60,411 was officially marked with a bright green status tag, adjudicated/closed. Every digital scan, every transcript of Julian Vance's tearful press conferences from 1997, every high-resolution photo of the broken plastic BMW key casing, and the full multispectral 3D mapping of the Cherry Creek State Park excavation site had been permanently locked into the state master repository. The narrative of the young architect who vanished into a freezing November night was no longer a haunting mystery hanging over the department. It was now a closed chapter, a textbook case study in the power of modern forensic evolution. Across the room, Dr. Eris Thorne was meticulously disassembling the vacuum metal deposition unit inside the trace evidence laboratory, clearing the clean room for the next wave of legacy evidence. On his desk sat a framed high-resolution image of the touch DNA electropherogram that had ultimately shattered Julian Vance's 30-year alibi. When you examine the historical progression of homicide investigation, Dr. Thorne remarked, looking up as Carter walked into the lab with a cup of black coffee, the biggest enemy was never the intelligence of the perpetrator. It was always our own technical limitations. In 1997, the crime scene techs did everything right according to their era. They preserved the vehicle, they cataloged every plastic fragment, they logged the calls. But they were operating in a dark room with a single candle. Today, we're flooding that same room with high-intensity laser arrays. The evidence didn't change over 30 years. Our ability to comprehend what it was telling us did. The systemic impact of the Bennett resolution continued to ripple through the legal and legislative corridors of the state capitol. The Colorado State Legislature, inspired directly by the work of Operation Mountain Justice, unanimously passed the Bennett-Thorne Legacy Forensics Act. The new law established a state-funded grant program designed to assist smaller, rural law enforcement agencies across the Western Slope in digitizing and reanalyzing physical evidence from unsolved cold cases dating back to the mid-20th century. The legislation mandated that any physical object recovered from a violent crime scene, regardless of how degraded or insignificant it appeared at the time, must undergo non-destructive multispectral optical scanning and advanced low-copy touch DNA analysis before a case file could be archived. The broken piece of a BMW key fob found beneath an accelerator pedal had ceased to be just a piece of evidence in one man's murder. It had become the catalyst for an entire state's forensic renaissance. In Seattle, Washington, Claire Bennett sat in her home office, looking out at the calm, gray waters of Puget Sound. Beside her laptop sat a clean white binder containing the official court transcripts of Julian Vance's guilty plea and his signed allocution statement. For 29 years, her family's life had been paralyzed by a horrific, open-ended trauma. The unanswered questions had haunted every holiday, every family gathering, and every quiet moment of reflection. But reading the cold, clinical words of the confession had finally dissolved the phantom terrors that had plagued her youth. The mystery was gone, replaced by the stark, undeniable reality of the truth. Lucas was not wandering lost, his memory was not forgotten, and his killer was spending the remainder of his natural life behind the high concrete walls of a maximum security prison. Claire picked up her pen and began writing the opening chapter of a memoir dedicated to her brother's life. Not a story about a chilling crime, but a celebration of an exceptional young man whose legacy had helped bring justice to scores of forgotten victims. Hundreds of miles away, deep within the austere, concrete confines of the Colorado State Penitentiary, inmate 19970 walked slowly around the small perimeter of the outdoor exercise yard. Julian Vance's world had shrunk to a tiny 22-hour-a-day cell, a steel bed, a concrete bench, and the relentless, suffocating quiet of his own thoughts. Clad in the rough, faded denim uniform of the state correctional system, his posture stooped with age and the sudden, total collapse of his public identity, he existed now as a ghost among ghosts. The prestige he had fought so desperately to maintain through financial fraud and cold-blooded murder had evaporated into thin air. He was no longer the successful real estate developer, the beloved suburban neighbor, or the tragic best friend. He was simply a convicted murderer whose name had become synonymous with cowardice and betrayal. Correctional officers noted that Vance rarely spoke to other inmates, choosing instead to spend his recreation hours staring silently at the snow-capped mountain peaks visible beyond the high, razor-wire-topped perimeter walls, the very mountains where he had tried, and ultimately failed, to hide his crime forever. Back at the Denver Police Department headquarters, Detective Evelyn Carter stepped out into the basement archive one last time before the end of her shift. The long rows of high-density mobile shelving stood quiet and motionless under the dim fluorescent lighting, holding thousands of gray cardboard boxes that contained the unwritten endings of Colorado's dark past. She walked slowly down aisle 12, her hand brushing along the cold steel edges of the shelves, until she stopped in front of a new section labeled Operation Mountain Justice, Phase 2. Here sat 20 newly selected cold case files from 1998 and 1999, each containing legacy physical evidence waiting to be processed under the lab's newly expanded biometric capabilities. Carter pulled the first file from the shelf, holding it firmly against her side as she turned back toward the elevator. The story of Lucas Bennett had reached its definitive, triumphant conclusion, but the endless pursuit of truth was far from over. As the elevator doors closed, carrying her back up toward the brightly lit squad room, she knew that no matter how many years had passed, no secret was safe from the light, and no victim would ever be left behind in the dark. Part 8. The high-intensity halogen lights of the primary forensic suite hummed with a low, continuous vibration that seemed to synchronize with the steady tick of the wall clock. Outside, a light evening mist drifted across the downtown rooftops of Denver, casting a soft, diffuse glow against the frosted glass windows of the precinct. Detective Evelyn Carter stood beside the central workstation, watching as the high-resolution optical scanner completed a full 3D spatial render of an item recovered from case file 98 to 1104, a vintage leather wallet preserved from an unsolved 1998 armed robbery and homicide. Although the trial of Julian Vance had concluded, and the killer of Lucas Bennett was securely housed inside a maximum security prison cell, the scientific techniques born from that investigation were now driving an unprecedented wave of forensic activity across the entire department. The Bennett case was no longer just a victory in the annals of Denver police history. It was the gold standard for every cold case waiting in the subterranean archives beneath their feet. In the adjacent cleanroom, Dr. Eris Thorne was carefully reviewing the digital calibration logs for the newly acquired submicron multispectral laser scanner. The equipment, purchased through the legislative funding granted under the Bennett-Thorne Legacy Forensics Act, allowed the laboratory to process porous surfaces such as aged paper, textiles, and weathered wood, without causing a single particle of degradation to the underlying biological or chemical residue. When you look back at how we handled the broken BMW casing from Lucas's car, Dr. Thorne said, adjusting a digital focal ring on his terminal, we proved that touch DNA isn't just about finding skin cells. It's about recognizing that every physical object involved in a violent event acts as a permanent ledger. The perpetrator leaves behind a chemical signature, and the environment seals it. Julian Vance spent 29 years believing that snow, mud, and time would scrub his identity from that explorer. He never realized that the very force he used to break that plastic component trapped his genetic signature inside the fracture line forever. The institutional memory of the Denver Police Department was being completely rewritten by the success of Operation Mountain Justice. Older detectives who had retired decades ago were frequently invited back to the squad room to review the new forensic findings on cases they had been forced to abandon when their leads ran cold. These veteran investigators walked through the brightly lit laboratories with a mixture of quiet awe and profound relief, seeing the cold cases that had haunted their careers finally yield to the undeniable clarity of 21st century biometrics. The lingering sense of defeat that had long hovered over the basement archives was gone, replaced by an urgent, disciplined determination. Every cardboard box sitting on the steel shelves of the subterranean vault was now viewed as an active crime scene, temporarily suspended in time, waiting for its own moment of technological revelation. In suburban Seattle, Claire Bennett sat in her quiet living room, holding a newly bound manuscript of her brother's biography. The painful, agonizing void that had defined her family's reality for nearly 3 decades was finally filled with dignity, honor, and truth. Through her public advocacy work and her collaboration with missing persons support networks, Claire had become a beacon of hope for hundreds of families across the country who were still trapped in the agonizing limbo of an unsolved disappearance. In her frequent lectures to law enforcement academies and victim advocacy groups, she repeatedly returned to the lesson of her brother's case, that closure is not an act of forgetting or simply moving on, but the arrival of an unassailable truth that allows love to endure without the suffocating weight of unanswered questions. Meanwhile, Inside the silent, concrete walls of the Colorado State Penitentiary, inmate 199704 was adapting to the harsh, unyielding realities of life behind bars. Stripped of his freedom, his social status, and his carefully constructed lies, 64-year-old Julian Vance spent his long days in complete isolation within the facility's high-security unit. The arrogance that had sustained him through 29 years of suburban freedom had vanished entirely, replaced by the dull, hollow resignation of a man who knew he would die behind a steel door. During his weekly sessions with the facility's intake psychologist, Vance admitted that the most terrifying moment of his life had not been the arrival of the tactical team on his porch, but the quiet moment in the interrogation room when Detective Carter placed the high-resolution photo of the touch DNA electropherogram on the metal table before him. He confessed that in that exact second, he realized the universe had kept a precise, unalterable record of his crime, and that no amount of charm, money, or calculated performance could alter the physical laws of nature. Back at the Denver Police Department headquarters, the late-night shift was in full swing. Detective Evelyn Carter sat at her desk under the warm glow of her desk lamp, opening the newly assigned binder for Phase 2 of Operation Mountain Justice. The story of Lucas Bennett was officially complete, its final pages written in the unbreakable language of justice and truth. But as Carter looked across the squad room toward the heavy steel door that led down to the subterranean archives, she knew that the work was only just beginning. Hundreds of unsolved files still waited in the quiet dark below, holding their own hidden secrets, waiting for their own voices to be restored. Carter picked up her pen, adjusted her lamp, and plunged into the next file, knowing that as long as there were investigators dedicated to seeking the truth, no victim would ever be forgotten, and no shadow would remain dark forever. The warm summer breeze of July 2026 carried the faint, crisp scent of mountain pine across the urban expanse of Denver, filtering through the high-grade climate control systems of the precinct's forensic wing. Inside the command center of Operation Mountain Justice, the energetic momentum generated by the conviction of Julian Vance had solidified into a permanent, highly disciplined operational rhythm. The success of the Lucas Bennett investigation had transformed the unit from a temporary cold case initiative into a permanent flagship division of the Colorado Department of Public Safety. Modern computational power, combined with the continuous refinement of low-copy touch DNA analysis and geospatial satellite telemetry, had turned the squad room into a high-tech nerve center where the forgotten crimes of the 20th century were systematically dismantled and brought into the light. Detective Evelyn Carter stood in front of the primary digital display matrix, her eyes scanning the structural layout of a newly unsealed investigation. Case File 99-0418 involved the December 1999 disappearance of Marcus Vance, no relation to Julian Vance, but a case that shared eerie thematic parallels with the Bennett homicide. Marcus was a 32-year-old biochemical engineer who vanished without a trace from his home office in Golden, Colorado, leaving behind an idling vehicle, an open briefcase, and a cold cup of coffee on his desk. For 27 years, the initial investigation had circled endlessly around suspected financial motives or voluntary flight, but like the early days of the Bennett case, the true physical evidence had remained buried beneath the limitations of late 1990s forensic processing. Beside Carter, Dr. Eris Thorne was carefully mounting a micropipette into the robotic arm of an automated genetic sequencer. When we re-examined the physical evidence items recovered from Marcus Vance's residence in 1999, Dr. Thorne explained, tapping a key to display a series of high-magnification multispectral images. The original text noted a faint, oily smudge on the brass deadbolt of the front entryway. In 1999, standard serology tests returned negative for blood or bodily fluids, so the sample was logged into cold storage and effectively forgotten. But using our current wet vacuum submicron extraction protocol, the exact technique refined during Phase 1, we managed to isolate a pristine mixture of touch DNA and trace volatile hydrocarbon residues from that single door latch. The digital sequencer hummed softly as the results rendered on the large screen. The software parsed through millions of base pairs, comparing the genetic profile against the expanded National Biometric Database, a system that had grown exponentially since the passage of the Bennett-Thorne Legacy Forensics Act. Within seconds, the screen flashed with a high-confidence biometric match. The touch DNA recovered from the brass deadbolt belonged to a former industrial hazardous waste contractor who had operated along the Front Range corridor throughout the late 90s. Furthermore, the trace hydrocarbon residues matched a specific, regulated industrial solvent, an identical chemical signature to compounds seized during an illegal dumping raid near the abandoned mining shafts of Clear Creek County in early 2000. "The pattern is undeniable," Carter said, her voice filled with sharp, focused clarity as she pulled up the suspect's historical movement logs, bank records, and property deeds. In the late 90s, perpetrators believed that if they avoided leaving blood, fingerprints, or shell casings at a scene, they were completely invisible. They relied on the vastness of the Colorado wilderness and the slow passage of time to erase their footsteps. But they didn't account for the fact that every time a human hand touches a surface, it leaves behind an indelible, microscopic signature. They thought they were taking secrets to their graves, but all they did was set a timer that was bound to run out. The investigative methodology that had brought down Julian Vance was now executing its tactical precision on case 99-0418. Armed with the new genetic match and spatial satellite historical mapping, Carter's team began assembling a detailed timeline of the suspect's movements on the night of December 14, 1999. Satellite archival data from late 90s atmospheric radar arrays, reprocessed through modern machine learning algorithms, revealed subtle thermal anomalies in a remote section of an abandoned granite quarry in Clear Creek County, pinpointing a potential excavation site that had gone completely undetected for over a quarter of a century. As the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the squad room, Carter looked out over the bustling room. Detectives were on their phones with district attorneys, forensic analysts were cross-referencing legacy financial microfilms, and tactical officers were preparing gear for a subterranean search operation in the mountains. The legacy of Lucas Bennett was alive in every corner of the room. His tragedy had laid the groundwork for a revolutionary leap forward in investigative justice, turning the pain of one family into a shield that protected the innocent and a relentless hammer that struck down the guilty, no matter how many years had passed. In the basement archives, the mobile high-density shelving moved with a smooth, electronic hum as another section of gray cardboard boxes was retrieved for Phase 2 analysis. The past was no longer a silent vault of lost causes. It was an open, living dialogue between historical tragedy and modern scientific truth. Detective Evelyn Carter picked up her jacket, grabbed the freshly generated warrant file for case 99-0418, and stepped toward the elevator. The pursuit of justice had evolved into an unstoppable force, and as the door slid shut, carrying her toward the waiting convoy, she knew that every shadow along the Front Range was about to be cleared away, one cold case at a time. Part 10. The high-altitude wind howling through the jagged granite pass of Clear Creek County carried a sharp, icy bite, sweeping across the barren terrain where an abandoned mid-century quarry sat hidden behind dense stands of lodgepole pine. It was early morning, and the heavy overcast sky hung like a leaden sheet over the rugged wilderness 40 miles west of Denver. Tactical search vehicles, mobile laboratory units, and heavy excavation trucks lined the narrow access road, their engine idling hums blending with the roar of the wind. This isolated canyon, long forgotten by developers and hikers alike, was now the central focus of Operation Mountain Justice as the investigative team pushed into Phase 2, determined to bring closure to the 1999 disappearance of biochemical engineer Marcus Vance. Detective Evelyn Carter stood at the edge of the quarry's north rim, her tactical coat buttoned tightly against the chill as she observed the search grid below. Alongside her was Dr. Eris Thorne, holding a ruggedized field tablet displaying a real-time, high-definition spatial render generated by 3 heavy-duty airborne LiDAR drones circling above the pit. The archival satellite radar data from December 1999 gave us a general quadrant, Dr. Thorne explained, pointing to a highlighted red cluster on the digital topography, but modern ground-penetrating radar paired with subsurface magnetometers has isolated an exact disturbance beneath 9 feet of compacted gravel and industrial quarry runoff. The soil density profile shows a localized void consistent with an artificial excavation that was hurriedly backfilled 27 years ago. Down in the floor of the pit, a specialized archaeological recovery team clad in heavy thermal suits worked within a temperature-controlled temporary shelter erected over the target site. Utilizing the precise, non-destructive excavation protocols developed during the recovery of Lucas Bennett at Cherry Creek State Park, technicians carefully sifted through layers of frozen clay, crushed granite, and decayed organic matter. Every bucket of earth passed through multi-tier mechanical sifting screens, monitored by forensic geologists searching for trace mineral anomalies, chemical residues, or microartifacts. At 11:20 a.m., the audio link between the excavation pit and the mobile command trailer crackled to life. "Command, this is Field Tech 1, a voice announced, tight with suppressed adrenaline. "We have visual on structural remains at the 9-foot depth marker. We've uncovered a rusted stainless steel document briefcase and preserved synthetic textiles consistent with late 1990s cold weather apparel. We are halting mechanical tools and transitioning exclusively to manual soft brush extraction." Detective Carter and Dr. Thorne descended the metal stairs into the quarry pit, stepping inside the pressurized recovery dome. Under the bright, glaring illumination of high-intensity LED flood arrays, the scene was breathtaking in its tragic clarity. Resting within the dark, mineral-stained clay was the intact leather jacket and skeletal remains of Marcus Vance, preserved in an anaerobic pocket created by the dense quarry runoff and packed granite dust. Resting beside the remains was the stainless steel briefcase he had carried from his home office on December 14, 1999, still latched shut, its chrome locks oxidized but unbroken. While the forensic anthropology team began the painstaking process of cataloging and recovering the remains, Dr. Thorne utilized a portable multispectral laser scanner directly inside the trench to analyze the outer surface of the leather jacket and the briefcase handle. Within minutes, the field terminal rendered a vivid, high-contrast fluorescence map of the handle's textured surface. The perpetrator grabbed this briefcase when he moved the body into the quarry, Dr. Thorne noted, pointing to a brilliant cluster of green fluorescent markers on the screen. "We have rich biological deposits embedded in the crosshatch leather grip, touch DNA that has been hermetically sealed inside an oxygen-deprived soil matrix for nearly 3 decades. Back at the Denver Police Department headquarters, the biometric processing unit worked at maximum capacity. The touch DNA profile isolated from the briefcase handle was loaded into the state's high-throughput genetic sequencer, running against the National Criminal Database, while forensic accountants executed a parallel deep dive into legacy corporate ledgers from late 1999. The suspect identified during the initial deadbolt analysis, Arthur Pendleton, a former industrial hazardous waste contractor, had died in 2018, leading many early analysts to assume the case would end in a post-mortem dead end. But the paper trail, re-examined through modern financial auditing software, revealed a much larger, darker conspiracy. Pendleton had not acted alone. He was merely a hired proxy. Bank microfilms from December 1999 uncovered a series of untraceable wire transfers totaling over $200,000, routed through offshore shell accounts to Pendleton's private firm just 48 hours after Marcus Vance vanished. The source of those funds led directly back to a former executive partner at Marcus's biochemical research firm, a man named Victor Sterling, who had spent the last 27 years building a vast international pharmaceutical empire on patents originally authored by Marcus Vance. Sterling paid Pendleton to eliminate Marcus and steal his proprietary research files contained inside that briefcase, Detective Carter stated during an emergency briefing with the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office. In 1999, Sterling framed Marcus's disappearance as a voluntary flight following alleged corporate embezzlement, blacklisting his name and seizing his intellectual property. Sterling believed that Pendleton took the secret to his grave in 2018. He believed that 27 years of corporate prestige and hundreds of millions of dollars in pharmaceutical profits had cleansed his hands of blood. At 4 p.m., Armed with a touch DNA match from the briefcase handle, the physical recovery of Marcus Vance's remains, and the unsealed financial wire transfers, Detective Evelyn Carter led a team of state investigators and federal agents into the glass and steel skyscraper of Sterling Biomanufacturing in downtown Denver. The contrast between the freezing, mud-soaked quarry pit in Clear Creek County and the opulent, polished marble penthouse executive suite was absolute. Victor Sterling, now 71 years old, sat behind a massive mahogany desk, dressed in a bespoke Italian suit, looking out over the panoramic skyline of the Rocky Mountains. When Detective Carter entered his office, flanked by uniformed officers holding a signed warrant for first-degree murder, aggravated kidnapping, and conspiracy, Sterling merely smiled with cool, arrogant condescension. "This is absurd," Sterling said, leaning back in his leather chair, his voice smooth and dripping with institutional entitlement. "Arthur Pendleton was a low-level contractor who died years ago. You have no living witnesses, no credible evidence, and no legal standing to disrupt my company over 27-year-old corporate rumors." Detective Carter stepped forward, placing a thick, clear evidence bag directly on the polished mahogany desk. Inside was a high-resolution, full-color optical printout of the touch DNA electropherogram recovered from the stainless steel briefcase handle, accompanied by the spatial satellite mapping of the quarry site and the unsealed offshore bank records bearing Sterling's digitized 1999 signature. "Arthur Pendleton may be dead, Mr. Sterling," Detective Carter said, her voice dropping into a cold, unwavering register that froze the room. "But the leather briefcase you paid him to steal was found 4 hours ago buried beneath 9 feet of rock in Clear Creek County, sitting beside Marcus Vance's body. And the touch DNA on the briefcase handle doesn't belong to Pendleton. It belongs to you. You handled that case in your office before you gave it to Pendleton to dispose of. Science doesn't care about your corporate empire, your wealth, or the 27 years you spent pretending to be a legitimate businessman. You're under arrest." The arrogant composure on Sterling's face shattered instantly. His skin turned a sickly gray as he stared at his own genetic signature printed across the scientific report on his desk. The bailiff stepped forward, snapping heavy steel handcuffs around his wrists, leading the multimillionaire CEO out of his penthouse suite in full view of his stunned employees and the national media crews gathering in the lobby below. As evening fell over Denver, the news of Victor Sterling's arrest sent shockwaves through the corporate and legal sectors across the country. The success of Operation Mountain Justice had once again demonstrated that time was no longer a shield for the guilty. Whether a crime was committed in a snowy suburban park or driven by high-level corporate greed, the microscopic receipts left behind at the scene held an immortal patience, waiting only for the arrival of those determined to seek the truth. Detective Evelyn Carter stood on the steps of the headquarters building, watching the blue light of police cruisers reflect off the glass skyscrapers, knowing that another voice silenced in the dark had finally been given back its name, its dignity, and its justice. The grand formal auditorium on the 4th floor of the Denver Police Department headquarters was filled to capacity. Rows of velvet-cushioned seats were packed with state prosecutors, forensic scientists, homicide detectives, and journalists representing national media outlets. High-definition broadcast cameras lined the perimeter, their red tally lights glowing against the mahogany-paneled walls. Above the main podium, a massive digital banner displayed the crest of the Colorado Department of Public Safety alongside the bold silver typography, Operation Mountain Justice, Phase 2 Status Briefing. Detective Evelyn Carter stood at the side of the stage, her arms crossed over her navy blazer as she reviewed her notes. Beside her, Dr. Eris Thorne made a final adjustment to a high-powered digital projector connected to the central workstation. The dramatic arrest of Victor Sterling, the pharmaceutical titan whose billion-dollar empire was built upon the stolen research and murder of biochemical engineer Marcus Vance, had triggered an international media frenzy. But inside the command room of Operation Mountain Justice, the arrest was not viewed as a dramatic climax. It was a single, logical data point in a much broader, systemic overhaul of cold case resolution across the American West. When the chief of police completed his opening remarks, Detective Carter stepped up to the lectern. The room fell instantly silent, the soft hum of camera shutters and microphone arrays filling the air. She looked out at the audience, her gaze lingering for a moment on the front row, where Claire Bennett sat alongside the surviving family members of Marcus Vance. 29 years ago, when Lucas Bennett vanished into the freezing expanse of Cherry Creek State Park, society lived under a fundamental misconception. Detective Carter began, her voice steady, clear, and resonant. It was believed that if a killer possessed enough cunning, enough financial resources, or enough patience, time would eventually act as their ultimate accomplice. We were told that evidence degrades, memories fade, and the ground will permanently absorb the secrets buried within it. But over the past 8 months, through the resolution of the Bennett homicide and the arrest of Victor Sterling, we have proven that the physical universe does not forget. She signaled to Dr. Thorne, who activated the display screen behind her. A high-resolution, three-dimensional spatial schematic appeared, illustrating the multispectral laser scanning array used during Phase 2. The visual shifted from the broken plastic BMW key component from 1997 to the microscopic leather crosshatch fibers of the 1999 stainless steel briefcase, handle recovered from the Clear Creek quarry. What you see behind me is not simply modern police technology, Carter continued, pointing a laser at the vibrant fluorescent clusters marking the touch DNA profiles on the screen. It is a fundamental shift in the balance of power between criminal evasion and forensic science. The touch DNA we isolated in these cases did not consist of visible biological stains. No blood, no saliva, no hair. It consisted of subnanogram cellular deposits trapped beneath fracture lines, inside leather grooves, and along oxidized metal latches. In 1997 and 1999, these microscopic deposits were completely invisible to the human eye and beyond the reach of existing serology testing. But today, using non-destructive wet vacuum extraction and low-copy nuclear sequencing, we can read these biological signatures as clearly as a signed confession. Dr. Thorne stepped up to the secondary microphone, bringing up a complex algorithmic matrix that tracked spatial satellite telemetry and historical atmospheric data. The integration of advanced geophysics with molecular biology is what defines the second phase of our operation, Dr. Thorne explained, his scientific tone adding a layer of clinical authority to the briefing. By reprocessing legacy atmospheric radar sweeps from late 20th century satellite archives through modern machine learning models, we can detect microdisturbances in topsoil density that occurred decades ago. When we pair those spatial vectors with high-throughput genetic matching, the geographical vastness of the Colorado wilderness is no longer a hiding place. It becomes an open map. The briefing turned from theoretical methodology to concrete legal results. The Wayne County Prosecutor's Office formally announced that following the court appearance of Victor Sterling, 2 additional high-profile cold cases from 1998 had been officially unsealed under Phase 2. Financial asset forfeitures seized from Sterling's corporate holdings, amounting to tens of millions of dollars, had been legally redirected into a permanent state endowment dedicated exclusively to funding low-copy touch DNA processing and ground-penetrating radar sweeps for underfunded law enforcement districts throughout the Rocky Mountain region. Following the press conference, as journalists moved toward the podium to record interviews with the legal teams, Detective Carter walked back toward the quiet corridor leading to the forensic wing. She was met near the glass doors by Claire Bennett, who wore a silver pendant around her neck containing a microscopic piece of polished granite from the Cherry Creek Memorial Site. "When this began, Detective," Claire said softly, her eyes reflecting a mixture of deep emotion and profound gratitude, "I thought justice was something that only existed in theories or courtroom dramas. I thought my family would spend the rest of our lives carrying an open wound. But watching you stand up there today, showing the world how my brother's story paved the way for Marcus Vance and so many others, it made me realize that Lucas didn't just get brought home. His story became a shield for every forgotten victim in this state." "Your brother's case taught us how to look closer, Claire," Carter replied, her tone warm and grounded. "Julian Vance thought he was smarter than the law. Victor Sterling thought he was richer than the law. But neither of them realized that science doesn't negotiate with arrogance. Lucas gave us the key, and we aren't going to stop using it." Later that evening, As the setting sun cast a deep violet hue across the jagged skyline of the Front Range, Detective Carter walked down the subterranean corridor into the deep storage archives of the precinct. The mobile high-density shelving stretched into the distance under the dim, energy-efficient lighting. Aisle 12, once home to the dusty, forgotten box of Case 97 to 60,411, was now immaculate, its steel racks lined with meticulously cataloged digital storage units and multispectral backup drives. Carter pulled a stool up to the master terminal at the center of the aisle and opened the primary ledger for Phase 3. The screen illuminated her face with a soft blue light, revealing a list of 12 cold cases dating from 1995 to 2001, unsolved disappearances, unexplained vehicular incidents, and cold case homicides that had sat in the dark for over a quarter of a century. Each entry represented a family waiting for answers, a perpetrator living under the false comfort of suburban anonymity, and a collection of physical evidence items waiting for their turn beneath the laser arrays. She placed her hand on the cold steel edge of the first box on the shelf, Case 95-0812, involving the vanishing of a young female photojournalist near the abandoned mining trails of Summit County. Carter opened the cardboard lid, lifting out a worn leather camera strap preserved inside a vacuum-sealed archival bag. She held it up to the light, observing the faint, textured marks where human hands had gripped the strap 31 years ago. "We're coming," Carter whispered into the quiet silence of the vault. She placed the camera strap gently onto the transport tray, locked the ledger, and carried the file toward the elevator. The pursuit of justice was no longer a race against time. It was an absolute, mathematical certainty. The cold darkness of 1997 had been permanently broken, and as the elevator doors closed, carrying her back up to the brightly lit laboratory above, the relentless pursuit of truth prepared to claim its next shadow. The late July humidity clung heavy over the high-altitude terrain of Summit County, where the dense, dark pine forests of the Arapahoe National Forest gave way to the treacherous, crumbling shale of an old silver mining pass. Nearly 11,000 feet above sea level, the air was thin, cold, and quiet, broken only by the intermittent thrum of heavy-duty diesel generators and the high-pitched whine of hydraulic equipment. A fleet of state police mobile units, specialized mountain search gear trailers, and tactical command vehicles sat parked along the narrow, unpaved shelf road overlooking the abandoned town site of Montezuma. This remote wilderness, frozen under deep snowdrifts for 8 months out of every year, was the primary grid sector for Phase 3 of Operation Mountain Justice. Detective Evelyn Carter stood on a natural granite ledge jutting out over the gorge, holding a ruggedized field tablet while thermal imaging drones circled 200 feet above the treeline. Beside her, Dr. Eris Thorne adjusted the tripod of a newly deployed portable subsurface laser spectrometer, a piece of cutting-edge optical equipment engineered specifically to analyze multi-layered mineral strata without disrupting delicate organic material trapped beneath. 31 years ago, in August 1995, Carter said, her voice carrying clearly over the mountain wind as she brought up the digital case file for Case 95-0812, 24-year-old Maya Lin, an aspiring photojournalist for a Denver alternative weekly, packed her camera gear into her Subaru and drove up into these mountains to document illegal toxic dumping near abandoned mining shafts. Her car was found 4 days later parked off Sector Road 640, doors unlocked, film canisters scattered across the floorboard, and her primary 35mm SLR camera missing. The 1995 search was called off after 2 weeks when early autumn blizzards buried the pass in 4 feet of snow. Dr. Thorne tapped the tablet interface, pulling up a multispectral optical comparison of the leather camera strap that Carter had retrieved from the basement archives during the launch of Phase 3. When we ran the high-resolution multispectral laser scanned across the crosshatched nylon and leather of that strap, Dr. Thorne explained, we didn't just find Maya's skin cells. We recovered a distinct, secondary touch DNA profile embedded deep within the metal eyelet rivets, where someone had violently pulled the camera off her shoulder. Furthermore, the vacuum extraction process isolated microscopic traces of specialized commercial grease, specifically a rare, graphite-based lubricant used exclusively in heavy-duty mining winches and cable hoist systems during the mid-1990s. The genetic signature isolated from the camera strap eyelets had been run through the expanded National Biometric Registry, returning a direct match to a 72-year-old former mining equipment operator named Donald Vance, no relation to Julian or Marcus Vance, but a longtime local resident of Summit County who had worked as a site maintenance engineer for a private timber and reclamation firm in 1995. Donald Vance had lived a quiet, solitary life in a log cabin just 4 miles down the valley from the Montezuma Pass, completely unbothered by law enforcement for over 3 decades. Like Julian Vance and Victor Sterling before him, he had operated under the cozy, comforting assumption that the sheer scale of the Rocky Mountains and the relentless erosion of 30 years had dissolved his crime into ancient history. Down in the steep ravine 400 feet below the granite ledge, a specialized alpine search and rescue team working alongside forensic anthropologists navigated the treacherous rockslide area. Guided by satellite radar telemetry and subsurface density modeling, the excavation team focused on a collapsed timber-framed mine portal that had been sealed with crushed granite and fallen timber in late 1995. Armed with pneumatic rock saws, ground-penetrating radar units, and high-intensity LED light towers, the crew worked with methodical, surgical precision. At 2:15 p.m., the radio on Carter's tactical harness crackled to life. "Command, this is Recovery Alpha," a voice reported, steady despite the thin mountain air. "We have cleared the outer timber collapse at Mine Shaft 3. We have located a heavy steel cable hoist system locked around a collapsed wooden shaft door. Optical borescope cameras inserted through the timber gaps have confirmed synthetic textile remains, a preserved leather camera bag, and a metallic camera body resting 6 feet down the secondary shaft incline." Detective Carter and Dr. Thorne descended the steep trail, rappelling down the final shale embankment to the mouth of the mine portal. Inside the newly stabilized opening, under the brilliant white glare of the mobile LED arrays, the scene was preserved in chilling detail. The freezing, low-oxygen atmosphere of the deep mine shaft had slowed natural decomposition, leaving the physical evidence remarkably intact. Maya Lin's 35mm camera, its metal body scratched but unbroken, lay beside her camera bag. Dr. Thorne immediately deployed the portable multispectral scanner inside the mine portal, casting a vivid green laser grid over the heavy steel cable hoist and the external casing of the recovered camera body. Within moments, the optical sensor rendered a brilliant array of fluorescent cellular deposits along the camera's mechanical film advance lever and the metal locking clasp of the camera bag, signatures that matched the secondary touch DNA profile isolated from the camera strap in the Denver archive. "He ambushed her while she was photographing the illegal dumping site," Carter observed, her eyes reflecting the cold green light of the laser array as she surveyed the dark shaft. "He took her camera, tried to open the film housing to destroy the evidence, couldn't figure out the latch, and threw both her and her gear down this abandoned shaft. He sealed the portal with heavy equipment, walked back down his mountain, and went back to his quiet life, confident that no one would ever pull down 3 tons of crushed granite to look inside." Back in Denver, a secondary tactical team moved with absolute silence through the quiet, tree-lined streets of Silverthorne, a small mountain town located 15 miles from the mine site. At 4:30 p.m., 3 unmarked state police cruisers pulled into the gravel driveway of a sprawling, wood-shingled cabin on Timberline Way. 72-year-old Donald Vance was sitting on his front porch, cleaning a hunting rifle in the warm afternoon sun, when Detective Evelyn Carter and 4 heavily armed tactical officers rounded the corner of his house. Donald Vance froze, his weathered, lined face turning pale as his eyes locked onto the police badges and the thick manila case file in Carter's hand. He didn't reach for his rifle. His hands simply went limp, the gun cleaning cloth slipping from his fingers to the wooden deck boards. "Donald Vance," Detective Carter said, her voice dropping into the familiar, cold register of absolute authority that had dismantled Julian Vance and Victor Sterling. "You are under arrest for the August 1995 first-degree murder and kidnapping of Maya Lin. We pulled your DNA off the eyelets of her camera strap and we just recovered her body and her camera from Shaft 3 at Montezuma Pass. For a long, agonizing moment, the old man sat motionless on his porch, listening to the gentle sigh of the wind through the surrounding pine trees. The quiet lie he had nurtured for 31 years, the comforting belief that the mountain had swallowed his sin forever, shattered into 1,000 irrecoverable pieces. He looked up at Carter, his eyes watery and hollow, shedding the tough, rustic exterior of a mountain woodsman to reveal the terrified, guilty soul underneath. "How?" Donald Vance stammered, his raspy voice trembling as the steel handcuffs clicked around his wrists. "How could you possibly find anything in that mine after 30 years? It was sealed. It was completely covered in rock." "The mountain didn't hide your crime, Donald," Carter replied softly, stepping aside as officers escorted him down the porch steps toward the waiting cruiser. "It just held on to it until we came back for it." By nightfall, news of the breakthrough in Case 95-0812 dominated local and national news broadcasts across the country. The arrest of Donald Vance marked the third major cold case homicide solved by Operation Mountain Justice within less than a year, proving beyond a shadow of a doubt that the methodologies established during the Lucas Bennett investigation were not a fluke, but a permanent, revolutionary evolution in criminal justice. In Seattle, Claire Bennett watched the live news coverage from her home office, tears of quiet validation welling in her eyes as the news anchor described the recovery of Maya Lin and the arrest of her killer. She opened her notebook and added a new entry to the final chapter of her memoir, a chapter no longer defined by sorrow or open-ended grief, but by the triumph of an immovable truth that continued to break down the darkest walls of the past. Back at the Denver Police Department headquarters, Detective Evelyn Carter stood at the high-resolution display workstation in the forensic suite. On the screen before her, Dr. Thorne was initiating the preliminary digital reconstruction of the undeveloped film roll recovered from Maya Lin's 35mm camera, using specialized infrared digital processing to restore the light-sensitive emulsion that had sat in the dark for 31 years. As the images slowly materialized on the display, crisp, clear photographs of the toxic dumping site, followed by a final, startlingly clear frame showing Donald Vance standing beside his heavy equipment in August 1995, Carter leaned back in her chair, taking a deep, quiet breath. The voices of the silenced were no longer lost in the mountain winds, lost under icy culverts, or buried beneath quarry runoff. They were speaking clearly, loudly, and without fear, backed by the infallible discipline of modern science and the unyielding commitment of those who refuse to let them be forgotten. Carter closed the digital file on Maya Lin, tagged it as adjudicated, and reached for the next legacy file on her desk, ready to carry the light of justice into the next dark room. The sharp, rhythmic clack of high-speed digital film scanners vibrated through the climate-controlled air of the Trace Evidence Laboratory. Outside the high-rise windows of the Denver Police Department headquarters, August in the mile-high city brought brilliant, piercing blue skies and the faint, distant scent of dry summer grass drifting down from the foothills. Inside the precinct, the atmosphere was defined by an intense, operational focus. The arrest of Donald Vance in the 1995 ambush of photojournalist Maya Lin had triggered a massive administrative expansion of Operation Mountain Justice. What had begun as an isolated, high-tech re-examination of Lucas Bennett's 1997 cold case disappearance had officially evolved into the most successful multi-jurisdictional forensic task force in the history of the Rocky Mountain region. Detective Evelyn Carter stood at the central conference table, surrounded by homicide investigators, forensic genealogists, and federal prosecutors. Spread across the digital displays was Case File 96-0302, a haunting cold case involving the April 1996 disappearance of 19-year-old university student Hannah Rhodes. Hannah had vanished late one rainy Thursday evening after leaving a campus library near downtown Denver. Her vehicle was discovered 48 hours later parked in an alleyway 3 blocks from her apartment, intact, locked, and devoid of any obvious signs of struggle or forced entry. For 3 decades, the investigation had stalled in a maze of dead ends, contradictory witness reports, and phantom leads, leaving her family locked in a perpetual nightmare. In 1996, the initial investigators focused almost exclusively on the exterior of Hannah's car. Detective Carter said, her voice commanding the full attention of the room as she used a digital stylus to bring up a high-resolution 3D schematic of the vehicle's interior. They dusted the door handles, checked the steering wheel, and scraped the floor mats for mud samples. When those tests returned negative or inconclusive, the file was shelved. But when Dr. Thorne's team reprocessed the preserved vehicle trim components last month using our advanced wet vacuum submicron extraction, they didn't look at the driver's side. They looked at the interior rear-view mirror. Dr. Eris Thorne stepped forward, tapping a key to display a multispectral fluorescence render of the interior mirror's plastic casing. When an assailant sitting in the rear passenger seat reaches forward to adjust or turn a driver's rear-view mirror to prevent themselves from being identified in the reflection, Dr. Thorne explained, pointing to a brilliant cluster of fluorescent markers along the plastic housing. They exert a distinct rotational force. That pressure embeds microscopic epidermal cells deep into the textured seam of the plastic matrix. The original techs in 1996 didn't have the technology to extract non-visible biological material from non-porous seams. But using our low-copy touch DNA protocol, we recovered a complete, hypervariable nuclear DNA profile from that exact seam. The genetic profile had been uploaded into the expanded state and federal biometric databases, running through the advanced forensic genetic genealogy algorithms established under the Bennett-Thorne Legacy Forensics Act. Within 48 hours, the system identified a tight cluster of third-degree genetic relatives, leading the investigative team directly to 68-year-old Raymond Mercer, a former Municipal Transit Authority supervisor who had worked the late-night routes surrounding the university campus in the spring of 1996. Mercer had retired comfortably a decade earlier, living as in pillars of the community figure in a quiet lakefront community near Fort Collins. Armed with a genetic match and spatial movement profiles, Carter's team executed a court-ordered subpoena for Mercer's legacy employment logs, route GPS archives from early transit pilot programs, and personal financial records from April 1996. The paper trail revealed a chilling pattern. Mercer had utilized his off-duty access pass to navigate municipal parking structures and quiet alleys unnoticed, selecting targets who believed they were walking through safe, well-lit urban corridors. Mercer operated under the belief that urban environments erase evidence faster than the wilderness, Carter stated during a tactical briefing with federal agents. He believed that city traffic, rain, and the constant passage of thousands of people would dilute his physical footprint until it was completely gone. He didn't realize that a single touch on an interior mirror inside a locked vehicle creates a permanent biological stamp that survives decades of changing weather, vehicle ownership transfers, and police storage. At 6 a.m. the following morning, a coordinated tactical team closed in on Mercer's lakeside home in Fort Collins. As the sun began to reflect off the calm water, officers secured the perimeter while Detective Evelyn Carter knocked firmly on the front door. When Raymond Mercer opened the door, clad in a bathrobe, holding a cup of coffee, his face setting into a mask of polite confusion, Carter did not hesitate. She placed a full-color optical printout of the touch DNA electropherogram recovered from Hannah Rhodes's rear-view mirror directly into his hands. Raymond Mercer, Carter said, her tone cold, precise, and absolute. You are under arrest for the 1996 kidnapping and first-degree murder of Hannah Rhodes. The science caught up with you. Mercer's hands trembled violently, the ceramic coffee cup slipping from his grip and shattering on the hardwood floor of his entryway. The smooth, practiced attachment he had maintained for 30 years dissolved in an instant, replaced by the sheer, unadulterated terror of a man realizing that his dark past had finally shattered his quiet present. As the bailiffs clicked heavy steel handcuffs around his wrists, leading him down his gravel driveway, neighbors gathered at their windows, watching in stunned silence as another suburban myth of innocence was permanently dismantled by the light of truth. 2 weeks later, guided by spatial satellite analysis of municipal transit storage facilities from 1996, excavation teams unlocked a sealed concrete vault beneath an abandoned transit maintenance yard in South Denver. There, beneath 3 feet of industrial gravel and reinforced concrete, the remains of Hannah Rhodes were formally recovered, accompanied by her university ID card and personal belongings. 30 years of open-ended trauma for the Rhodes family came to an abrupt